Teleport is a decentralized ride-sharing app that operates on the Solana blockchain. It aims to create a community-driven, decentralized ride-sharing platform to compete with established companies like Uber and Lyft. The app allows users to request a ride by entering their destination, and a licensed and insured driver from local rideshare companies will pick them up. Teleport is built on the TRIP protocol, which is powered by the Decentralized Engineering Corporation's DEC technology. The project seeks to address some of the challenges faced by traditional ride-sharing services by giving more control to drivers and customers. The app is designed to reward both riders and drivers by turning ride-sharing into a protocol, thereby creating an open economy with aligned economic incentives. The Teleport app is available for iPhone users, and it is positioned as a gateway to an open rideshare network, aiming to free ride-sharing from monopolies. The platform has received $9 million in seed funding and has garnered support from notable investors and industry professionals. The app is expected to be live at the end of the fourth quarter of this year. Additionally, Teleport has a strong social media presence, including a Twitter account where they share information about their unique approach to ride-sharing, emphasizing lower costs for riders and higher earnings for drivers. The Internet is an open network on which anyone can start an Internet service provider, run a website, or build an email client. This open structure has led to the creation of the world's most dynamic economy, the online economy. However, before the invention of digital programmable money, it was impossible to design open systems for marketplaces such as rideshare, food delivery, and vacation rentals. As a result, intermediaries have stepped in and started charging high fees instead of letting markets set fair prices. In the rideshare industry, the intermediaries' take rate can often exceed 40%. This means that a significant portion of the money paid by customers is taken out of local economies and funneled towards centralized, multinational intermediaries. This paper proposes an alternative approach, the creation of a fair and independent marketplace that is built on an open and interoperable protocol, the Rideshare Protocol, TRIP. TRIP enables local, lean rideshare companies to work together and form a global network that benefits drivers, riders, and regional economies while being self-governed by the participants. The purpose of a rideshare system is to connect drivers with nearby riders and facilitate safe, fast, comfortable, and economical transportation. The key actors in rideshare are drivers and riders. The rider is able to indicate their current location and intended destination via a rideshare application installed on their phone. A rideshare company then looks for nearby drivers who are similarly connected to the platform. In a closed system, rideshare applications from different companies are not compatible. If email worked in this way, users of Microsoft Outlook and Apple Mail would not be able to email each other. Similarly, if the web were closed, Apple's Safari browser would not be able to communicate with Microsoft's website. When protocols are closed, like in the case of rideshare, it becomes difficult for users to switch between different vendors. Decentralizing rideshare means returning it to the open norms of the Internet. In a decentralized system, participants can choose from a variety of apps and servers by many different vendors that communicate with each other. Centralized rideshare services often do not allow the market to set a fair price. Instead, they set prices themselves and maximize the value they can extract. Redesigning rideshare as a decentralized system means more money goes to drivers, riders pay less per ride, and more money stays in local economies. Many Internet applications, including Twitter and Reddit, were initially developed as open systems. Twitter launched its public API in September 2006, leading to a thriving ecosystem of third-party Twitter software that helped the platform succeed. However, Twitter decided to lock down its API in August 2012, once it became large enough to no longer require third-party applications. Reddit's openness has followed a similar path, Thousands of developers have created third-party Reddit software over the years, but Reddit is now shutting down API access in preparation for its IPO. Centralized rideshare companies similarly have promised good pay and flexibility to drivers but then reneged on those promises the moment they were no longer convenient. For users and developers alike, it has become evident that company promises of remaining fair, neutral, and open cannot be trusted. The solution is to construct genuinely decentralized and provably impartial protocols that are not owned or controlled by any single company, but rather enable all participants to freely collaborate in creating, maintaining, and improving the system. With the arrival of distributed consensus technology, it is now possible to construct such provably self-governed protocols for marketplaces and online communication systems. Marketplaces enable direct competitors to benefit from cooperation with each other. It is no coincidence that in many cities, restaurants of the same cuisine and stores with similar wares cluster together and form neighborhoods. Although these shops still compete on price, selection, and quality of goods and services, they all benefit from increasing foot traffic to their area by working together. Bringing open marketplace technology to rideshare will unlock the advantages of cooperation for all market participants. Drivers receive fairer pay and a say in the governance of the network. Riders enjoy better prices, faster rides, and a wider selection of options. Regulators have increased ability to positively influence the local transportation market. Regional markets retain more money in their local economies. Entrepreneurs and businesses have more opportunities to build and innovate on top of transportation infrastructure. When a network service starts gaining users, its value proposition becomes stronger. More drivers on a rideshare application mean shorter wait times for riders, while more riders mean higher chances of drivers finding a fare nearby. This positive feedback loop is called a network effect, and it can fuel rapid growth of a new service. This strength can also become a moat, deterring new entrants from competing in the same space. If a new rideshare service starts up, it'll struggle to attract enough drivers and passengers to achieve the same level of service efficiency unless it heavily invests in incentives to quickly build its user base. While network effects and moats are often used to justify high valuations for startups that are first to market, in reality, they rarely end up being the ultimate winners, and network effects are frequently disrupted by new entrants. Understanding how network effects are built was key to first building out the digital frontier. However, now that many markets have matured, it has become even more important to understand how network effects can be broken. Habit, brand recognition, and trust can create strong barriers to entry on their own, but they do not represent good examples of network effects. In the absence of a network effect, a formerly unknown but superior product with better customer experience and/or cheaper prices can still become a competitive threat by first serving a subgroup of users to build trust and brand recognition and then expanding from there. A moat in the network effect sense requires an advantage that doesn't derive from the relationship of an individual with the product, but from advantages a service can only garner from having a larger numbers of users. For users, the immediately tangible effects of network effects present in just two dimensions: unit economics, the ability to provide the service more efficiently than smaller competitors; customer experience, the quality of the service experienced by users is higher than can be provided by smaller competitors. A moat only protects the incumbent if there is no bridge, a contiguous and growing set of users that the upstart can serve better than the incumbent, despite its originally smaller size. While network effects provide the incumbent with an advantage, operational inefficiencies can nullify these advantages. Such operational inefficiencies can include a large headcount in the tens of thousands, excessive corporate debt, high customer and driver acquisition cost. These unfavorable conditions are present in current rideshare incumbents. If a new system could establish itself with an initial audience and then grow, its higher operational efficiency would quickly become a threat to the established competition. As the new system grows, the relative advantage of the competition's network decreases, while its disadvantage in operational efficiency remains. This destructive cycle can rapidly become fatal for the outmaneuvered incumbent. A market-operated rideshare network would be able to operate far more efficiently than current rideshare incumbents, in part because driver and rider acquisition cost could be lowered dramatically by turning all network participants into true entrepreneurs. This will result in better pay for drivers and lower costs for riders. Rideshare companies have fought long and hard to classify their drivers as independent contractors rather than employees. Although drivers theoretically have the freedom to work for other rideshare companies or multiple networks, in reality, network effects have kept them locked into the dominant platform. If all drivers and riders were to switch services at the same time, they could transition to a more free and fair system. However, such coordination has often been considered impossible. What is missing is a mechanism to coordinate this switch. We call a tool to enable such social coordination a bridge, because it can overcome the moat of a network effect. Instead of attempting to convince everyone to switch at the same time, a bridge provides an opportunity for those who switch first to help build and take on a larger role in the governance of the network. Voting power on the network is held by participation badges, known as trip rewards, which we will describe in more detail later. A rideshare marketplace that is fairer, with the participants, not intermediaries, in control, is not just a better system. It also has the potential to become a social movement and spread like one. As more users switch, the risk of switching decreases, and the newly issued trip rewards are spread out across a larger and increasingly more diverse user base. The earliest and most active users get a larger amount of the network's voting power, but all active users have a say in the governance of the network. Eventually, the new solution becomes so influential that staying on the old platform becomes riskier than switching. At this point, the bridge has successfully facilitated the transition to the open network by helping users coordinate their actions. Marketplaces, even those located in town squares, have always been subject to rules, whether they be noise ordinances or regulations regarding waste management. Customers won't visit a marketplace that's not clean and safe, so good governance is essential for a thriving marketplace. However, network effects and moats can put marketplaces in a privileged position where owners may favor their own interests over those of vendors and customers. Since a marketplace requires rules, the question of who creates those rules on a decentralized marketplace arises. While concentrating governance in a single company may work in the short term, monopolists are likely to abuse their power in the long term. The ideal scenario would be for the governance of the network to be in the hands of its most active participants. However, the most active participants on a network are constantly changing. New participants join and old participants leave. The trip network is governed by holders of trip rewards. Trip rewards are instantiated as non-fungible or fungible tokens that represent participation and voting power in the network. General governance including protocol upgrades, changes to authorization flow, the change of fundamental network parameters all require voting. Trip rewards serve a variety of functions on the network. They help maintain a proper balance between supply and demand, ensure smooth operation of the network, and keep governance maximally decentralized and in the hands of the most active network participants. Trip rewards are automatically issued by the protocol to acknowledge those who participate in operating and growing the network. Some trip rewards might be represented as NFTs commemorating taking a first trip or riding in a new city, while others are issued to those who contribute the most to the network within a certain time span. One way to obtain trip rewards is by participating in a weekly competition to contribute the most to the health and growth of the network. These cards are created on a fixed issuance schedule, with new cards minted in each epoch, 7 days in block time, and automatically distributed to the most active network participants. A lot of different entities are required to make a ride happen: drivers, riders, balancers, verifiers, compliance auditors, operators, client companies, mobile application developers, The TRIP protocol ensures that voting power is continuously rebalanced towards the subset of entities that are most actively contributing to making the TRIP marketplace successful. In protocol design, a Sybil attack is an attempt by an individual to gain influence over the network by creating multiple fake identities or transactions. For example, an attacker who controls both a rider and a driver could create many fake transactions between them to gain additional voting rights on the TRIP marketplace. To prevent fake transactions and accounts from distorting the allocation of voting power, the protocol requires a Sybil fee to be paid to the TRIP marketplace from every transaction on the network. This fee is necessary for the transaction to be considered valid. Transactions are conducted in national currency stablecoins and will go deeper into the payment flow in future sections. The TRIP marketplace holds the Sybil fee, to be exclusively controlled by the network's governance. TRIP reward holders have the ability to vote on the exact amount of Sybil fee that must be paid. However, if the Sybil fee were to be removed or significantly lowered by vote, the network could quickly be hijacked by a hostile attacker capable of creating a large number of fake transactions. This demonstrates the critical importance of functioning governance for the operation of the network. In future iterations of the protocol, the USDC Sybil fee could also potentially be used to finance the automated acquisition of gas for the blockchain the protocol utilizes, as well as to facilitate the automated payment of various other blockchain operations. To create a decentralized rideshare marketplace that can compete with centralized rideshare companies, the network needs widespread adoption and a healthy balance of drivers, supply, and riders, demand. A key precondition for incentivizing adoption is to operate with lower overhead costs compared to centralized rideshare companies. By creating a network of local, lean rideshare companies powered by free open-source software, drivers can earn more and riders can pay less. Moreover, the fees paid to local rideshare companies will circulate in their respective local economies instead of being siphoned off to multinational corporations. To accelerate network growth even further, the system also continuously issues additional voting power in the form of TRIP reward to the most active and supportive participants. This additional issuance is called the balancing mechanism. Balancing helps repair supply and demand imbalances and ensures that control over network governance remains in the hands of the most actively contributing participants. Users who refer other users, drivers or riders, are called balancers. When a ride is completed, the system keeps track of all the entities involved in making the ride successful. All completed transactions on the network are counted towards this balancing mechanism. New TRIP reward are issued at the end of each epoch to all entities based on the amount of transaction volume they contributed to during that epoch. To ensure that governance remains in the hands of those who do the most work on the network, the system locks all newly issued TRIP reward and prevents immediate on-chain transfers. The parameters of this lockup mechanism are automatic and cannot be changed except through protocol governance. As the network matures, these protections become less necessary, and transfers become less disruptive to the network's success. There are two ways to measure the maturity of the network: time. As time passes, the network matures. Transaction volume, the total transaction volume, in USDC, as a measure of the global adoption of the protocol. Just as there is only one global email protocol, SMTP, and one global web protocol, HTTP, we believe that there will ultimately be only one global rideshare protocol, TRIP. Based on predictions of total future rideshare transaction volume, $300 billion annually by 2030, we can measure how far TRIP adoption has come based on annual transaction volume in USDC. A time volume clock combines the measures of both time and transaction volume. This on-chain clock unlocks TRIP rewards as time and transaction volume accumulate. If adoption happens faster than predicted, the unlock speed will accelerate. If adoption lags behind the predicted curve, the unlock will slow down, but it will never fall below the bounds set by the time-based unlock. Future software upgrades for the TRIP protocol will be adopted through governance mechanisms that use a decentralized proposal process. This process allows community members to actively shape the protocol's future, rather than a single organization or company controlling the network. We believe that a robust and fair governance structure is key to the protocol's success. TRIP reward holders will have the ability to create and vote on proposals for protocol improvements. This decentralized approach ensures that the platform remains flexible and adaptive to the changing needs of its users, incorporating diverse perspectives and ideas. The operation of the decentralized rideshare network involves the following entities. Riders and drivers are users who connect to the protocol to offer or request rides using rideshare applications. These apps are the equivalent of a web browser or email client. Operators handle the regulatory and operational requirements of providing rideshare service. They are powered by rideshare server software, which is comparable to a web or email server. Depending on the applicable local regulatory framework, an operator may serve as Transportation Network Company, TNC, or Transportation Network Provider, TNP, or Fleet Manager. The TRIP marketplace consists of a set of blockchain smart contracts that offer coordination and consensus services to the rideshare network. These smart contracts are governed by a decentralized autonomous organization, DAO, of TRIP reward holders and help the network remain neutral and fair without having to rely on centralized authority. Balancers are network participants that help the TRIP marketplace overcome supply/demand imbalances by inviting additional drivers and riders. Verifiers are entities who inspect driver licenses, perform car inspections, conduct background checks and verify phone numbers. Compliance auditors are entities that are capable of confirming the legal and operational readiness of both verifiers and operators. Once verified, any entity that is capable and legally permitted of performing a role can fulfill that role within the system. All entities on the network are uniquely identified by a public/private key pair that they self-generate. Entities use their keys to identify themselves, authenticate connections, sign messages, and store USDC and other digital tokens, as well as certificates associated with their public key. Entities can make statements about each other by signing statements about the public keys of other entities. These statements can be made either on-chain or off-chain. The TRIP marketplace is a set of smart contracts that run on a blockchain. It provides consensus, coordination, and governance services for all other components of the rideshare network. In order to comply with legal and regulatory requirements, maintain high safety standards, and ensure customer satisfaction, all rideshare network participants must undergo an authorization process appropriate for their role before being granted access to the network. The TRIP marketplace is democratically governed by network participants and holds ultimate authority on the network. Through voting on the TRIP marketplace, the authority to make attestations can be temporarily and revocably delegated from the TRIP marketplace to dedicated compliance auditors and verifiers. A compliance auditor is a firm or individual authorized by the governance of the TRIP marketplace to verify that operators and verifiers are legally permitted and operationally capable of fulfilling their assigned roles on the network. A verifier is a service or entity that validates claims or assertions made by users or entities within the decentralized ecosystem. Verifiers play a crucial role in establishing trust and credibility when traditional centralized authorities are not present. Verifiers must be in legal and operational compliance with all applicable regulations and laws before they begin providing attestation services to the network. Operators must obtain licenses and insurance, and be operationally prepared to comply with regulatory and safety requirements in each geography they wish to serve, before they can begin matching riders and drivers within those locations. To ensure that verifiers and operators are compliant with local regulation and operational requirements, the TRIP marketplace votes to deputize dedicated compliance auditing firms. These firms receive authorization by multi-sig keys to sign off on the regulatory and operational readiness of operators and verifiers. Once operators and verifiers have been approved by a majority multi-sig vote, they are publicly listed on the contract together with their public key and DNS address, as well as additional metadata such as geographic zones of operation. While operators and verifiers are authorized on the blockchain, drivers and riders, users, are authenticated off-chain to preserve privacy and control. After a verifier has completed the certificate-based authorization flow, the user's rideshare application receives certificates that they can use to prove their authorization with a high level of precision and control. Types of authorizations include background checks, driver licenses, car inspections, and any other credentials required for legal operation. For example, if a user's rideshare application requires a certificate to prove that its phone number has been verified, they can contact a verifier capable of providing that service. After the usual public key-based handshake described earlier, the verifier then sends a text message with a code to the user's phone number. After the user enters the correct code in either the rideshare app or on a dedicated website, the phone number verifier confirms that the phone number has been verified by transmitting two signed certificates to the user's rideshare application, a signed certificate stating that has established on that has a valid phone number. A signed certificate stating that has established on that has a valid phone number, and that this phone number is +1 415 000-9999. Having received two separate certificates, the user's application is now in a position to choose whether to prove that their phone number has been verified, or that a specific phone number has been verified for their use, without having to resort to zero-knowledge proof techniques. Certificates have an expiration date and can be revoked through a certificate revocation list. The user is now verified through the verifier and can prove to any other entities that their phone number has been verified, without needing to disclose the phone number to other protocol participants. Once at least one operator and enough verifiers have been approved to operate within a specific geographic area, the system is considered live in that area. When two entities establish a direct network connection, they use their keys to establish an encrypted and mutually authenticated session. The session is protected against impersonation, man-in-the-middle, and replay attacks. During connection establishment, operators validate that drivers and riders have passed all necessary checks, while drivers and riders validate that the operator has been approved for operation in the region. Upon a successful match by the operator, drivers and riders again verify each other's credentials before beginning a ride. The multiple redundancies in this process help ensure that rides established via the TRIP protocol are legal and insured, and that drivers and riders are vetted. Both riders and drivers can connect to all operators that are licensed to operate in or near their current geographic region. Riders can query all applicable operators for offers. Depending on local insurance, regulatory, and practical requirements, drivers can be connected to and/or online with one or more operators at the same time. Drivers can further instantly deactivate their active status with one operator and switch to another. The specific policy and triggers for switching are up to the rideshare application, but most handovers are expected to happen organically without user intervention. For example, automatic switching from one operator to another can occur when crossing state or country lines. Once the driver application crosses a service area border, the rideshare application will automatically become active with an operator licensed in the newly entered state or country. In the United States, the Interstate Commerce Clause, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution, the Full Faith and Credit Clause, Article 4, Section 1, and the Real Interstate Drivers Equity, RIDE, Act, 48 U.S.C. 14501, d. ensure that drivers can drop off customers in states other than the one where the initial pickup contract was established. Once drivers and riders are connected and their credentials are validated by local operator, drivers can indicate that they are available to accept rides, supply indication, and riders can request rides, demand indication. After going active, the driver's rideshare application regularly updates the driver's location with its active operator. When an operator with active drivers receives a ride request from an eligible rider, it checks the location of nearby drivers and uses its internal pricing engine to prepare an offer to both drivers and riders. Offers include both pricing and ETA estimates. Drivers get offers only from their active operator, but riders get offers from all validated and licensed operator in the geographic area. The pricing offers to both drivers and riders need to be mutually accepted before a trip is established. All pricing information and the take rate of all involved entities is fully transparent to all participants. Payments on the rideshare protocol, TRIP, are made using national currencies, such as the US dollar. The system, as much as is possible, supports both traditional payment methods such as credit cards and bank transfers, as well as newer payment methods like stablecoins backed by national currencies. Bank transfers, ACH, Fedwire, and credit card payment systems were originally designed between the 1910s and 1960s. As a result, they lack the necessary capabilities to fully interoperate with decentralized marketplaces designed in the 2020s. To bring the stability and security of national currencies, such as the US dollar, to the rideshare network, TRIP utilizes stablecoins. Stablecoins are digital equivalents of national currencies that can be used on modern open, programmable protocols such as TRIP. One such stablecoin is USDC. In the context of the TRIP protocol, USDC or other stablecoins are used as modern payment rails for the US dollar. Most payments within the TRIP protocol are made in USDC, or in other countries, using comparable, well-regulated, local market stablecoins. TRIP rideshare applications on mobile phones include software, a digital wallet, to directly store stablecoin balances. This gives users complete control over their funds without requiring any intermediaries or exposure to exchange rate risk. When booking a ride through a mobile application, users have several payment options. They can directly use USDC from their digital wallets, refill their digital wallets with the help of a licensed money transmitter, or pay a booking or aggregation agent by credit card or bank transfer to assist with the booking process. As soon as the customer begins searching for a ride, USDC funds that cover the ride are placed into an escrow program on the TRIP marketplace. After the ride concludes, funds from the escrow are used to settle balances with all entities that receive a payout from the ride. Payment flows will generally follow a broad overarching pattern, but may differ slightly between jurisdictions to comply with local regulations. If the user decides to use a booking or aggregation agent to help book a ride and pay with a credit card or bank transfer, the payment process is similar to the non-custodial flow. The booking agent charges its own fee structure for assisting the customer in securing a ride and assumes all risk for the credit card or bank transfer transaction with the customer, and then uses its own segregated USDC funds to order a ride to fulfill its booking contract with the customer. Since the purchase of a ride by a customer is a normal e-commerce transaction, additional customer identity verification before the credit card transaction is optional and depends in part on the comprehensive risk management strategy of the booking agent, since they are liable for any and all chargebacks. All recipients of funds, drivers, service providers, are always fully background checked, which reduces the potential for fraud. If a customer wants to refill USDC for direct use in their non-custodial wallet, additional identity verification is required to comply with anti-money laundering, AML, and Know Your Customer, KYC, regulation. Drivers are always paid in USDC to their non-custodial USDC wallets. The developers of the iPhone and Android applications can work with licensed money transmitters to facilitate withdrawals to drivers' bank accounts via ACH. If the money transmitter accepts TRIP certificate credentials, it is possible that the driver background checks that were already conducted for passenger safety can be reused by the licensed money transmitters to facilitate ACH withdrawals. At the end of a ride, the contract settles all outstanding payment balances out of escrow. Both the rider and driver apps report information, including the estimated time of arrival, ETA, and actual ride time, back to the trip marketplace. The trip marketplace can use this information to ensure that operators provide accurate ETA estimates. The operator is fully responsible for compliance with local legal requirements around the collection and reporting of trip data points, such as pickup/drop-off location, total fare, time of booking, number of passengers, wheelchair accessible requests and fulfillments. This is only necessary in jurisdictions where local law or regulation requires such reporting. Driver, rider, and operator ratings are optionally reported to a rating aggregation service as signed proofs. In the future, zero-knowledge proofs will be used to remove reliance on aggregation services while preserving privacy for all participants. Operators are responsible for the trips they facilitate and are required to conduct background checks on both riders and drivers before facilitating a match. The trip protocol enforces this by ensuring that both operator and the driver/rider they are matched with are licensed, insured, permitted to operate in their geographic target area, and have passed a background check. Operators who operate using the trip protocol are subject to the same requirements as any other rideshare operator. This includes full compliance with all applicable local regulations and laws, handling customer support requests, and cooperating with law enforcement. Operators also have the final say in resolving disputes and issuing refunds, in compliance with applicable laws and regulations. To join the network, operator must establish mechanisms for registering and responding to customer requests and complaints. This process is validated by dedicated compliance auditing firms that review their applications before verifying them via on-chain authorization. Operators that underdeliver on customer support, provide bad estimated times of arrival, ATAs, or are negligent of their duties to comply with safety regulations and ensuring the well-being of drivers and riders will be penalized by the trip marketplace or even removed from the network. Increased competition, closely tracked ratings, and enforcement of high standards by the trip marketplace compel operators to deliver higher quality service. Unlike in a centralized monopoly, riders and drivers have plenty of alternative options to choose from. Trip's architecture is carefully designed to select which data is transmitted to which party and where control over the data is located. Data is only shared with the minimum subset of recipients required for legal, safety, and technical reasons. Transaction and identity-related data never come into contact with a blockchain or any other public repositories. Payments do occur on the public ledger but contain no information about destinations beyond what any normal blockchain payment would reveal. The public nature of ledger technologies is known to have privacy implications, which have been thoroughly studied and researched. It is possible and reasonable to reduce information leakage from blockchain transactions in the future by introducing privacy-enhancing zk-SNARK technologies, and we do believe that this will be an important addition to future protocol versions. We've introduced TRIP, the rideshare protocol, an open and decentralized alternative to centralized rideshare services. TRIP's design provides for on-chain governance and compliance with local regulatory environments. With slight modifications, this approach could be applied to a broad range of online marketplaces. As the field develops, we expect that many of the necessary components we're developing will become interoperable across various protocols. A lot of what we have pioneered with TRIP will also be relevant to developers of future decentralized food delivery, courier service, vacation rental, and auction marketplaces. Some of these marketplace functions could potentially even be served by extensions of the TRIP marketplace framework. We welcome feedback and contributions and are looking forward to the launch of the first TRIP services, servers, and mobile applications.
It seems like the stage is set for the Fed to have a slow decline in rates.
If you continue to see that strong growth, you could actually get that soft landing that we had been looking for.
It does seem ultimately growth is going to have to slow.
If the economy slows more than sort of a Goldilocks landing, the Fed has room to cut rates maybe a little bit more.
I do believe in Goldilocks. Productivity is higher and these trade-offs are going to continue to be the Fed's dream come true.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Jonathan Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Hordern.
Live from New York City for our audience worldwide. Good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance alongside Lisa Abramowitz together with Anne-Marie Hordern. I'm Jonathan Farrell. Your equity market on the S&P 500 slightly negative, down by 0.1%. One bank in focus since the end of January, NYCB. That stock is down 6% in the pre-market. Lisa, we're talking about cutting in half, more than cutting in half, the market cap of this bank in just about a week.
Downgraded to junk, and not just because of concerns about property, also because they can't keep their staff around. Their chief risk officer and their chief audit officer departing this month or last month. Now a question of who's going to lead this bank. Key question when you take it back, is this just a repeat of what we saw last year on every level with respect to community banks? And are we seeing the beginning of that kind of fear of contagion work its way into markets?
So with a key difference, so last year is a rate shock that we all had to work through. This year, potentially, I stress potentially, a credit shock. And it feels like a perfect storm for commercial real estate. We've been talking about it now for the best part of 12, 18 months. It's been on everybody's horizon. You've got higher rates, higher vacancy rates, and all at the same time, you've got these loans coming due as well. It's kind of like the perfect storm for this particular spot of credit.
For this particular spot of credit in this particular bank, the key question is, we were talking about a rate shock last year. People now saying, now is the rate shock, because what you actually have now are some of these loans coming due. So do you see this sort of delayed and deferred rate shock come to the fore in a more meaningful way?
And finally, we saw someone in Washington asked about this. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen was asked about it. She says, I'm concerned. She thinks it's manageable. She didn't want to discuss an individual bank in depth, but clearly this has the eyes of individuals in Washington about potentially if this doesn't stay idiosyncratic.
So the question I'd ask, bank problem, sector problem, or market problem? Which one is it at the moment?
At the moment, it's a sector problem, because if you take a look at just the KBW index, it's down, I think, 11% just since January 29th. It's also a question with respect to specific banks that are going to that $100 billion level of assets and what kind of regulations. But if you saw, there were actually European banks that are struggling on the heels of this because of commercial real estate exposure in the United States. There's sort of the sniffing out of something that's maybe a little bit bigger, but maybe people are just looking for things to worry about.
Frankfurt, Tokyo, New York, this is becoming a global issue, Bramo.
That's the reason why I say it's unclear if it's just isolated to this particular sector. A lot of people saying it's contained. It's idiosyncratic. I know you love that word. I guess we shall see.
If you get enough idiosyncratic issues on top of one another, it's no longer idiosyncratic, right?
Right. So we have to wait to see if there are others. I will just say, today feels like deja vu all over again. I was looking at Yogi Berra quotes this morning because I was just feeling like frustrated with this sort of narrative roulette that ran out of themes, right? We're dealing with one theme after another. Banking crisis yet again. We're dealing with the issue of no landing, soft landing, who landing. We're dealing with Trump versus Biden. We're dealing with Chiefs versus 49ers. We're dealing with everything that just sort of happened in another year.
The bundle's back to the future.
Exactly. That's exactly it. We're talking about sports bundles. I mean, come on.
We're going to be talking about that a little bit later. Just to get you up to speed on NYCB, that stock is negative in the pre-market. Double-digit losses for the fourth time in 5 days yesterday. And we're down another 6 or 7% in the pre-market at the moment. The broader market is okay. Equity futures on the S&P 500 shaping up as follows. We're negative here by 0.05%. Yields are higher by a couple of basis points on a 10-year 4.1172. Coming up in just a moment, we'll catch up with Tony Dwyer of Canaccord Genuity as New York Community Bank plunges yet again. Kim Wallace of 22V Research with a border deal and aid for Ukraine set to fail on Capitol Hill. And Bloomberg's Geetha Raghunathan with a shake-up in sports streaming and Disney earnings on deck. It's back to the bundle, Bramo, back to the bundle.
I remember when we were talking with Michael Nathanson about what is the sort of new model for streaming. And he said, it's the old model. Go back to the bundle. Well, guess where we are right now.
And guess who's joining us a little bit later?
Michael Nathanson.
Michael's coming up a little bit later this morning. Look out for that. We begin with our top story today, losing more than half its market cap in just a week. New York Community Bank plunging once more after a ratings cut to junk by Moody's saying, quote, NYCB's core historical, commercial and estate lending, significant and unanticipated losses on its New York office and multifamily property could create potential confidence sensitivity. Tony Dwyer of Canaccord Genuity joins us around the table for more. Tony, good morning to you.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning, sir. It's good to see you, buddy, in person. Let's get straight into it. Do we have a single bank problem? Do we have a sector issue? Or do we have a market problem too?
It's all of the three, but it's just not catastrophic. I think after the great financial crisis, John, everybody's waiting for that one thing in the financial sector that's going to blow up the system and create that kind of ultimate whoosh that we're going to get that creates the low that's identifiable. And this whole commercial real estate thing, it's not levered and owned by the same place that it was during the great financial crisis. So it's all three to a lesser degree, which is why we're talking in the green room. We kind of still have the zombie. We have the zombie economy. You have a Fed rate hike that has absolutely, it's been the fastest rate hike cycle in history into a generationally levered system. That's not great, but you have a service sector that's still spending money. And so you don't know if you're going to go into recession until you actually go into recession, or the Fed cuts rates and it's game on. We're just going to be in this period of uncertainty, and that showed up in the stock market.
Let's talk about the zombie, because what we're talking about is, are we seeing rate shocks that are really going to bear through in commercial real estate? Why haven't we seen more rate shocks, given that we kind of should have, given all the prognostication, the fact that companies borrowed at such low rates?
Okay, let's talk about the Dwyer family, right? So I have a 7-year, 7-1 adjustable rate mortgage. It's a 2 7/8 mortgage. Doesn't really affect me until I have to reset it. Like, higher rates don't affect me. I've already gotten the mortgage. It's not going to change for the next few years. But if I had to reset that, had I gotten it 3 years before and it's going into reset, then it's got a major change in my monthly payment. So the consumer spends on how much money they have available to them. And what kills the zombie, Lisa, this is, we got to understand what kills a zombie. Any good zombie, you got to love a good zombie movie. World War Z, Scooby-Doo and the zombie apocalypse. You got to love a good zombie, right?
Okay.
Right? So,
carry on.
So what kills the zombie is you got to figure out what created it. And what created it in this situation is a historically fast rate hike cycle. They went 75 basis points at a clip, 4 meetings in a row. So here's what they're going to do. As inflation's coming down at the same pace that it went up now, they're going to do 25 basis points and wait and see what happens. That's not the way it works historically. Once they cut. It takes longer, but then they cut faster. What kills the zombie is you kill what created it, that fastest rate hike cycle in history.
So what are you doing with this? I mean, how do you deal with zombies that aren't dying and that kind of are haunting out there, but in the meantime, things are kind of rallying and big tech is kind of leading and people are trying to rotate for a hot second?
So our view coming into the year was it was opposite day. The stage was set for a rally on October 27th, where you had this ramp. You had a historically oversold condition. Everybody was bearish. Russell 2000 was making a cycle low. The average stock was down 33%, blah, 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 right? Coming into the year, we were an opposite day. Bond yields were looking like they were going to collapse down to 3%. Everybody was at 3 3/4 on the 10-year yield. Yep. 7 rate cuts were priced in the market. It was the opposite of October 27th. I think the problem that we have in the market in this zombie-like economic environment where it's not discernible is you're chasing your tail. So you chase a ramp. Okay, it's good. We're good. And then it tanks, and you're like, all right, we're going to zero. And at the end of the day, over the last 2 years, cash has been the greatest performer. Because outside of the S&P 500, driven by those top 10, the Russell's down still 20% from peak. The equal-weighted S&P 500 is down over the last 2 years, slightly. So cash, you don't need to make a big call. We love big calls. Come on, TV, I'm going to make a big call. I don't need to make a big call. The big call is have some kind of medicine for the economy and for commercial real estate, for everything, for the government, for the election. You need lower rates.
Make a big call, Tony. Tony, it's funny you say this because back in October, we talked about this. You've got yields of 5% on a 10-year, through 5% on a 2-year. No one wants it. You drop down to 4, pile in, let's go. And now we've got this reversal once again. I think what we're trying to work out from the equity market perspective is whether we can continue to see a rally built on fewer and fewer names. We've gone from Mag 7 to what now, Lisa? Mag 4?
Mag 4.
Mag 3, Mag 2, who knows, by the end of the week.
NVIDIA.
Tony, do you expect this market to broaden out anytime soon?
Well, so our call, as you know, in 2022 is be pretty defensive. Even in 2023, you're going to get the rallies. I think we did a good job of calling them. I'm waiting for, now that you've got the Fed has made a pivot. The Fed is not saying we're going to look to raise rates. The Fed has said we're looking to lower rates. The timing of it's unclear, but that Fed pivot is an important thing. To me, what that makes me want to do is buy into that kind of weakness we saw on October 27th or any other low that we've had during that period. So that's where I'm different. In the last 2 years, I kind of wanted to rent stocks when they went down. You know, you get this whoosh, you want to come in, sentiment's too negative, and you get a nice bounce. Now I want to own them when they go down because I've had that Fed pivot. You've had an inflection point in leading economic indicators and money supply off of historically weak levels. So you have that kind of framework. Here's the problem.
Sure.
Let's look at the S&P 500. I don't do, targets are kind of made for TV. So let's use a consensus target of 5,100.
No calls, no targets.
Like,
what are you doing here?
Oh, I get right. I'm coming on TV, having fun with you guys.
Print.
Good morning. Good morning. So
Crushing it, Tony.
So 5,100 is the consensus target, right? That's a pretty small increase from here. It's well below the 6-month or 1-year T-bill. So that's, John, the call, and I'd like to make good calls. Opposite day in the beginning of the year when everybody wants to chase stocks, fade it. That was our call. October 27th, stage is set for a rally when everybody's, selling them and the Russell's tanking. There's calls to be made, but you don't do it until the indicators, both macroeconomic and tactical indicators, get you to the right place. And they're in no man's land right now.
Tony, this is great. You're going to stick with us. Tony Dwyer there of Canaccord Genuity. I'm not sure what it is about cartoons and fairy tales. We put Goldilocks on life support yesterday. We're talking about Scooby-Doo this morning. We try to broaden the audience here.
We're trying to
make Lisa laugh.
We're trying to reach a younger cohort. I can say, though, that the feeling of frustration and turning to cartoons highlights this feeling that we've been here before, maybe in a younger year, and are just trying to sort of, embody the frustration that a lot of people feel.
Executive producer writes in, do we need to bill Tony for the use of John's trademark after the hit? I mean, maybe. Equity futures on the S&P negative here by 0.06%. Let's get you an update on stories elsewhere this morning. Here's your Bloomberg Brief with Danny Berger. Hey, Danny.
Hey, John. PIMCO says the Bank of Japan may scrap its negative interest rate policy as soon as March and hike multiple times this year. The firm predicts that the BOJ will raise its benchmark to 0% in March or April before hiking by a quarter point by year end. PIMCO says quickening wage growth will likely create persistent inflation, allowing the central bank to exit negative rates. House Republicans are vowing to bring articles of impeachment for Homeland Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas back to the floor. The initial vote failed 214 to 216 after 4 GOP members sided with Democrats. But the Republican majority expects to hold another vote once House Majority Leader Steve Scalise returns from cancer treatments. Republicans charge Mayorkas with refusal to enforce immigration laws and failing to secure the border. Online talk show host Tucker Carlson says he will soon interview Russian President Vladimir Putin. The former Fox News anchor had been spotted in Moscow in recent days. The interview would be Putin's first conversation with Western media since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Carlson says he also intends to interview Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. That's your Bloomberg Brief. John.
Danny, thank you. Just to take a moment on that story, AMH, I'm not sure we can cover that story without pointing out the criticism of Tucker Carlson of traditional media. And he failed to acknowledge that there are journalists in that country who have tried to cover this conflict who are now in prison. Plenty of organizations around the world have reached out for an interview with President Putin. They just haven't been given one.
Right. And Tucker Carlson, in this video, he taped in Moscow before he sat down with President Putin, which, by the way, we should note, the Kremlin confirms that Tucker Carlson and Putin did, in fact, sit down, and Putin gave him this interview. He said that no other Western media bothered to interview Putin. 2 U.S. journalists, one from Radio Europe and Evan Gershkovich of Wall Street Journal, are detained and in prison in Russia, trying to cover that side of the story.
Any more headlines from that, of course, we'll bring them to you. Up next on this program, the Senate's border deal dead on arrival.
We can't walk away now. That's what Putin's betting on. Supporting this bill is standing up to Putin. Opposing this bill is playing into his hands.
That conversation is coming up next, live from New York City this morning. You're watching Bloomberg TV. Live from New York City, equities a little bit softer on the S&P 500. We're down here by 0.06%. Yields are higher by a single basis point, 411.53 on a 10-year. Under surveillance this morning, the Senate's border deal dead on arrival.
All indications are this bill won't even move forward to the Senate floor. Why? A simple reason. Donald Trump. He'd rather weaponize this issue than actually solve it. We can't walk away now. That's what Putin's betting on. Supporting this bill is standing up to Putin. Opposing this bill is playing into his hands.
Here's the latest this morning. The president pinning the blame directly on Donald Trump for tanking the Senate's deal to secure the southern border and provide aid to Ukraine. Kim Wallace of 22V Research remaining optimistic that something can still get done, writing this. A high conviction call remains that both Israel and Ukraine receive U.S. assistance this quarter, possibly as early as this month. The fate of the less market-relevant border agreement may not survive in any form, but it's too early to know. Kim, let's get straight into it, sir. Been looking forward to this conversation all morning. So before, it was Republicans who wanted to attach a border agreement to aid for Ukraine and to Israel, and now we're talking about unbundling that and still getting the aid done. Is that right?
That's certainly a possibility. One thing we can't know is what's going to happen next on the House floor and in negotiations between the House and the Senate. That's been proven steadily the last year. My point is, it's now that the border deal has been jettisoned by the people who asked for it, the next pertinent question is, does that mean the linkage between a border policy and Ukraine aid is no longer viable? Or, different way to ask the same question, does Ukraine aid die in the House along with border policy? My guess is no.
Well, a lot of Republican senators, to John's point, were linking this, and they said they will not sign up for Ukraine aid until the border is fixed, not just the border fixed, but parole, asylum provision changes. So do they need to still work on the border before they even begin discussing aid to Ukraine?
I'm not sure, because reading the bill, and I don't know how many members of Congress have actually read the Langford-Murphy-Sinema agreement. It's extraordinarily detailed. It is comprehensive. I won't compare it to what was done under Reagan, but certainly it approximates what Ted Kennedy was attempting to negotiate 30 years ago. Everything that's been asked for, and we do, let's face it, we have a beyond decrepit and broken immigration system, not just in the southern border, but period. But everything that's been asked for, more enforcement agents, more money for judges to move through asylum applications and decide on refugees. All of that is in the bill, along with a reform of immigration from the top to the bottom. It's an expansive bill. I would think that you'd keep that language in the drawer. If it's not viable in 2024, keep it in the drawer and see if it can come back in 2025. But the real question, and of course the market relevant question, is what happens to the war assistance aid, not just for the countries Israel and Ukraine, but also the request for defense industrial base investments and other things that apply to the U.S. directly.
Well, let's go to some of the war aid. Yesterday in the House, there was no agreement on a clean Israel bill. You have hawks, fiscal hawks, saying it's not paid for. You have progressives who don't want to vote for it, especially because it's no strings attached. How does Israel aid get done without being paid for in the House, and at the same time making sure Democrats can vote for it when Biden said he's going to veto a clean bill?
You know, I don't mean to, certainly this is not jocularity on display, but we have a pattern that's been established the last 13 months at least in the House of Representatives and in the Senate for that matter. Each body needs to pass legislation that they can pass. And then you find out what the negotiation can become. It's sort of a public discovery process as opposed to one that's usually negotiated in private. I am of the mind strongly, if you go back to the debt deal in May, that was dead 3 or 4 times within a week before it was alive and passed quickly. It's hard to predict what the next turn in negotiations are in Congress, largely because, as we saw last night, it's very difficult to count votes in the House. And in the Senate, they are more than likely going to send the House war supplemental aid with both bills, or both countries covered, and find out what happens. That's certainly one path, but I wouldn't preclude the numerous paths. I would focus more on the outcome. And the outcome for most members, their incentives are to provide aid to Israel and Ukraine. How they get there will be interesting to watch.
Well, the headline in the New York Times was a day of dysfunction. When you take a look at the Wall Street Journal, it's talking about how people have less confidence in the longer term economic outlook simply because there is a feeling of things not getting done. And then Jay Powell on Sunday in the 60 Minutes interview talked about how in the long run, the U.S. is on an unsustainable fiscal path, and that just means the debt is growing faster than the economy. It's probably time or past time to get back to an adult conversation among elected officials about getting the federal government back on a sustainable fiscal path. Are there any adult conversations, Kim, happening right now?
Yes, several of them. They just don't surface because they don't win the day and they don't drive headlines. But Chair Powell's point, and a lot of people's point, is that fiscal risk is coming. It's looming on the horizon. Washington hopes that it can ignore it for another 3 or 4 quarters so they get beyond the election. But this is the year that we pass, according to CBO's projections, and they update their projections today at 2 p.m. It's the first economic and budget outlook from them for 2024. They have said beginning this year, net interest payments will exceed the primary deficit as part of the total deficit. So we will be paying bondholders more than we are paying for programs, all of it with deficit spending. Amazing. That's not sustainable. I don't know how long it can go on, but you have to be concerned about issues like Treasury issuance, appetite for that issuance, and official liquidity. All of these discussions are adult and they're going on in the background. Maybe not on Capitol Hill yet.
Hey, Kim, this was great. It's good to hear from you, sir. Let's do this again soon. Kim Wallace there of 22V Research. Lisa, run on time. $42 billion of 10-year notes coming today. Tomorrow, I believe, $25 billion of 30-year bonds.
It's going to be a record issuance of 10-year notes today. And this really goes to Kim's point, which is we are paying for interest payments with new debt payments. This is like a classic PIK toggle bond in high-yield bond land, which is basically the most risky thing you could possibly do, where you basically defer all of your debt interest and you borrow more to pay for it. Those bonds are not treated kindly in the market, yet U.S. Treasuries have not yet woken up to that.
Tony, let's talk about this. What is happening in the fixed income market? I remember a few months ago we were worried about the deficit. Now we're comfortable again. How worried are you?
So you cannot fix debt with exponentially more debt. The issue with that, John, that's been the case since 1987 when I got into the market. Like, this is stuff that strategists and macroeconomists have been talking about since the early 1980s. Let me give you a little perspective in that. One of the things that really got us more cautious in 2022 was the moment that Jerome Powell used the name Paul Volcker. Because when you look at when Paul Volcker inverted the yield curve and shut down credit, which has been the case ex private credit and private equity, but when he did that in the early 1980s, you were at a generational low in debt to GDP. We're at a generational high in debt to GDP. In 1982, government debt to GDP was something like, I think it was 46% or something like that. Now it's 131%. So when Paul Volcker did it and it had the impact that it had, that was catastrophic to the economy, we did it again with more debt, but it hasn't mattered because there's another source of capital, and that's private credit.
And we can get into that in just a bit.
Sure.
Do you care about the auctions, though?
The auction stuff, it was a great shock when Janet Yellen announced, former Fed official, now working for the Democratic institution, said that they were going to lower the amount of long duration maturities when the market was worried about that. That was so surprising. So yes, I'm worried about it when it's being priced in right now. The bond market has been up on a ramp. So going into it, the market's already worried about it. And Lisa, this goes into the whole thing. It's like, how's the market going to react to an event isn't dependent on the event. It's dependent upon how it reacts going into the event. So think about, all of the times that we've had these major surprise moves, it's because it's already been discounted. It's already been priced in largely. It's never universally discounted. And we've had a ramp in Treasury yields, so some of that is already priced.
Tony, it's good to see you.
Great to
we
be
should
with
do this
you
every
guys.
week. This is great. Tony Dwyer.
Well, there's a price to be paid.
Got to tell me how much. Equity futures on the S&P, just about unchanged. Coming up next, going back to the bundle. Disney, Fox, Warner Brothers crafting their own sports streaming service. That's next. This is Bloomberg. S&P 500 looks like this right now. Equity futures are slightly negative, with the emphasis on slightly. We're down 0.01%. The Nasdaq's doing okay, at 0.1%. Once again, the Russell, the small caps underperforming. We're down 0.5%. Yesterday, okay session for the small caps, but rock bottom. Underperforming sector. Once again, the financials on the Russell. Looks like the banks in the penalty box, Bramo, all over again.
Given the fact that you've seen the KBW index of regional bank stocks completely tank, you do wonder how much people are treating this as idiosyncratic with respect to New York Community Bank and how much people are extrapolating out to maybe another repeat of last year.
We'll get into that I word in just a moment, shall we? Let's get to the bond market and let's talk about the S word, supply. The 2-year, the 10-year yields are just a little bit higher by a basis point on a 10-year, 4.1153. Let's call it unchanged on a 2-year at 4.40. I'll go over the numbers again and Lisa can talk about the significance of this and give you some scope. 42 billion of 10-year notes today. Tomorrow, 25 billion of 30-year bonds. Lisa, that's a lot of supply.
Yesterday, there was a 3-year bond auction that went okay. It actually went pretty well. Question is, as you get longer duration, how much do people get worried about the sustainability of the debt path that the U.S. has? How much do people start to bake in that premium? How worried are people about resurgent inflation and a no landing, soft landing, who knows landing kind of economy? But there's this issue here. As we deal with this, when do the auctions become important? When they have some kind of hiccup. Otherwise, people ignore them.
When yields get closer to 5%.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Or just any kind of disruption that sort of suggests that can give people some room to run with that kind of narrative.
Let's get into foreign exchange. The euro finding some stability just yesterday after the biggest 2-day drop going back to September, I think, over the previous 2 days before yesterday. The euro right now, 107.68, positive by 0.1%. This tension around the ECB. Lisa, you look at the data coming out of the United States at the moment, strong. You listen to the guidance from the Federal Reserve pushing back. It's very, very difficult to say the Fed's going to go before the ECB based on the data in the United States versus the data over in Europe.
You're feeling that, really. I actually think the euro, the euro-dollar is actually quite interesting right now because it's just grinding weaker with the euro underperforming the dollar, and people are saying maybe it has longer to run. Isabel Schnabel in the FT trying to push back a little bit, saying, wait a second, the last mile is going to be tough, and nobody really believes her.
Jane Foley of Rabobank coming up a little bit later this morning. Just this idea that maybe the euro can drift back towards parity. We'll get her forecast a little bit later. Under surveillance this morning, our top story, one of them at least, House Speaker Mike Johnson suffering back-to-back defeats. House Republicans failing to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas yesterday by a vote of 214 to 216. Just moments later, a bill providing aid to Israel without additional funding for Ukraine also failed in the House. Speaker Johnson threatening to bring back articles of impeachment against Secretary Mayorkas when the votes are ready in the coming days. Anne-Marie, it feels like McCarthy on repeat down in Washington, D.C.
Oh, certainly. The pressure is rising for Speaker Johnson. This is what Punchbowl News put out this morning. Quote, "It is truly one of the most embarrassing days in recent House GOP history." Think about how embarrassing the last few months have been for this House caucus of Republicans. And Punchbowl is saying this is one of the most embarrassing back-to-back defeats. Why did you put the Clean Israel bill on the floor if you knew it was going to be shut down? Why did you put my impeachment of Mayorkas on the floor if you knew you didn't have the votes? They knew that a few Republicans were going to join Democrats and shut it down. This is something that you promised your base you were going to do, and then you have back-to-back defeats. What are you offering to the Senate to try to get some sort of agreement?
Your own question. Why? Why did they?
I think they thought potentially they had a little bit of wiggle room with some people not being present. But you did have a Democrat who was at the doctor who then made it back to vote on this. But it just means that they're not whipping correctly. So something seems to be off, with the structure of how they're operating. But back-to-back defeats, it is embarrassing, per Punchbowl's words.
Well, for me, I'm just wondering, how do you get beyond just being a party of no? Mayorkas impeachment, no. Border bill with some of Ukraine aid, no. Standalone Israel bill, no. Nikki Haley lost to none of these above. Options in Nevada. I mean, really, like how many no's can we get in one day?
Isn't the current sitting president campaigning on a big no? Basically saying Donald Trump no? Isn't that ultimately the campaign of the current Democratic president this campaign season?
And in fairness, the campaign from former President Trump is no as well. So you have no, and no wonder people don't feel particularly confident.
Not much of a vision at all, is it?
Exactly.
No. Should we move on? Maybe we should. Let's talk about financials. New York Community Bank losing more than half of its market cap in about a week. The stock falling to the lowest level since 1997. And Moody's cutting its credit to junk. The agency warning of NYCB's holdings in commercial real estate. NYCB CEO defending the bank after the downgrade and pledging to bring in a new chief risk officer and chief audit executive. When you have to do that, Lisa, you know you're in a tough spot. They're in a tough spot.
Which is the reason why you're seeing the shares fall commensurately. The I word is really what we have to talk about. How idiosyncratic is this? How much is this hinged on two properties that are defaulting? How much is this starting to broaden out, given the fact that we're seeing in Germany, for example, some lenders deal with U.S. commercial real estate issues. You're seeing that in Japan. You're seeing that with other potential firms in the U.S. When do we see it kind of, the zombies, to use Tony Dwyer's analogy, when do we see the zombies actually come to the fore and bite versus just kind of lurk out there?
What's unsettling, I think, about NYCB is that it was just 2 loans. And I'm not saying it's just 2 loans, but the big part of that story in the last week or so was just 2 loans. The idiosyncratic work is interesting, so let's work with that. You've got higher rates. That is not idiosyncratic. A lot of people have got to work with that. The commercial real estate thing, I don't think we can say it's idiosyncratic for a couple of lenders. Everybody's got to deal with that. Vacancy rates are down. We're seeing these loans mature this year, a lot of them all at the same time. That's problematic. Where there is a unique aspect to the NYCB story is just operating in certain markets where you can't put up rents in the way that you'd like them to. I think that is slightly unique to some lenders in certain markets. But the overall story, higher rates, lower vacancy rates, all of these deals coming due at the same time, I don't think that's that idiosyncratic. I think that's a big theme for 2024.
You throw in the regulatory overhang and the potential to have to increase withholdings if you cross a certain level. Once again, that also is a pressure that's facing some other banks as well.
More on that coming a little bit later. Let's turn to this story. Sports streamers are going back to the bundle. Disney's ESPN, Fox and Warner Brothers are joining forces to launch a sports streaming service to show games usually seen on traditional TV. Each company will own 1/3 of the new venture. A name and pricing have yet to be announced, but it's expected to launch by the fall. Geetha Raghunathan, Bloomberg Intelligence media analyst, joins us now. Geetha, let's get straight into it. What is driving this story?
So I think a lot of different things, John. I mean, we know that Disney has been talking about taking ESPN over the top. They, of course, have, the marquee sports packages and, of course, the flagship ESPN network, which houses some of the best properties when it comes to sports. But really what all of these media companies are facing is, number one, is cord cutting, which is more and more people are leaving the traditional pay TV bundle. We had over 100 million households paying for it about, 8-10 years ago. Right now, that number is 70 million. So 30% of that base has been eroded, and it's probably going to erode and erode much, much faster. And so these companies obviously have to make that pivot and do it soon. And I think more importantly is also the question of costs for them, because if you look at what all of these big media companies are paying, it's about $30 billion that they pay the sports leagues every year in terms of rights fees. I mean, just Disney, Fox, and Warner Brothers Discovery are paying close to about $20 billion or so. So this really kind of helps them pool their resources, and it definitely helps them bid more aggressively for rights that kind of come up rather than against each other.
So, Geetha, this is the really important point. I just wonder what this means. If you're the NBA, the NFL, and you're looking at the sports auctions over the next several years, are you disappointed with this? Does this mean you're going to get less money?
Maybe. I mean, obviously having more bidders in the market definitely works to the benefit of the leagues. But having said that, we also have many new entrants in the sports bidding market. I would give you the example of Netflix, which just recently bought, WWE for $5 billion. You obviously have Amazon and Apple, which have kind of entered the market in a huge way over the past few years also. So we do have big tech. Of course, you have Google with, NFL Sunday Ticket. So we do have a lot of the big tech players kind of bidding very aggressively. So it's a little bit of both, I would say, John.
How close are we, Geetha, to actually going back to a bundle? And then you can basically pay either a separate amount just to get that, or you can get it through both Disney or for potentially Netflix, right? I mean, how far are we from basically going back to where we were before the streaming?
Yeah, it's funny, Lisa. I mean, we've come back full circle, right? So what Disney is doing is they know, Disney, Fox, Warner Brothers, they all know that they have an edge against Netflix because they really own the sports part of the whole media equation. I mean, Netflix is kind of now dominating when it comes to entertainment content, and that's fine. But Disney, Fox, Warner Brothers, they're trying to capitalize on what they have, and stem losses and make the most of it. So obviously, I think what we're going to see in a new world is kind of this bifurcation, right? You're going to see a sports bundle and you're going to see an entertainment bundle. Disney obviously is also bundling, this new sports package with its own Hulu and Disney Plus. So I think, that's going to actually help them overall in terms of, selling the entire package. But I think pretty much we're going to see the sports bundle and maybe Netflix and another service.
Moffitt Nathanson calls it the skinny sports bundle we've been waiting for. Is there enough content on this to attract all these consumers?
I think it definitely has enough content. Does it have everything? No, it doesn't. We're missing, Paramount, which has some of the key NFL packages, which has, March Madness. We're also missing, NBC and Peacock, and that, they obviously have some of the NFL packages as well as the Olympics. So it doesn't necessarily have everything, but I think it's definitely a good first start, and it helps the hardcore sports fan kind of get quite a good array of sports content.
Geetha, I'm thinking out loud, which is always dangerous, but bear with me. I'm thinking back to Hulu, which originally was a joint venture between several organizations and now ultimately is something just owned by the Walt Disney Company. Geetha, there was always this question mark about the future of ESPN. As you start to come together with other sports TV providers, could this be an option further down the road for ultimately the Walt Disney Company to spin off ESPN and just be consumed by this new joint venture run by two other companies?
Yeah, I definitely think so, John. I mean, that's a really interesting point. It's been kind of brought up over the years many, many times. Definitely possible. I mean, I think what they're going to do eventually is, of course, they have ESPN Plus, which is, kind of their skinny streaming service with some of the second-tier sports. That has about 26 million subscribers right now. But I think eventually ESPN Plus will probably be shuttered. Everything will kind of move onto this new streaming platform. And who knows? Yeah, probably, maybe the leagues can take a stake in it. Maybe it will be spun off and managed as a separate entity. But definitely it lays the groundwork for a lot more things to come.
Interesting. Any ideas about pricing, Geetha, this fall? Any numbers out there?
Not yet. I mean, we knew that the ESPN skinny service only with ESPN content would have to be priced at least $20 just for kind of it to be equivalent to the linear TV bundle. So I think this has to definitely come in at, maybe well below $100, definitely, which is the cable bundle. But obviously somewhere, I think the sweet spot would be somewhere in that $40, $50 range, maybe.
Interesting. Geetha, thanks for the update. Appreciate it. Geetha Raghunathan there of Bloomberg Intelligence. Bramo, thoughts on this one? $40 a month?
I just imagine that they're going to bundle things together and then they're going to sell it back to you at 5 times the price that the original bundle was at. I mean, essentially, isn't that what's going to end up happening? You could get exactly what you used to have just for, $437 a month.
So Hulu's already super, super expensive, right? It's like kind of nuts now. I think our producer just said subscription fatigue. Subscription fatigue is a real thing.
Right. So at some point, you might have subscription fatigue in terms of the number of subscriptions. Just a question here, though, of the price and whether people will say, fine, as long as I don't have to search 10 different platforms for my soccer game on a Saturday, I'm okay paying a higher price.
But still, some analysts are calling it skinny. And what we heard from Geetha is that there's some NFL games, if you watch American football, there's some NFL games that you have to go then to another subscription for. I mean, isn't the whole point of the bundle? Isn't the whole point of the bundle is one-stop shop? But it's not.
I play this game every weekend. It's like, where's the game? I mean, you're living it at home as well. It's like, what is the game on? Is it on Peacock or can I just watch this?
Which is the reason why I ask, how much are you willing to pay to not have to play that game?
I'm one of those idiots that will keep on paying. We just love sport that much.
That's my point.
Keep on paying.
That's where they're going to get the money.
I know.
It's going to get expensive.
Like
from idiots like me. Equity futures on the S&P totally unchanged. Let's get you an update on stories elsewhere this morning. Here's your Bloomberg Brief with Danny Berger. Hey, Danny.
Hey, John. Donald Trump has been denied immunity in the case surrounding his efforts to overturn the 2020 election. He attempted to claim that a sitting or former president is immune from criminal charges. The ruling was unanimous from a Washington, D.C. federal appeals court and now moves Trump closer to the possibility of facing a trial ahead of his November's election. The Republican frontrunner has until Feb 12th to appeal the ruling to the Supreme Court. Shares of Snap plunging in the pre-market trade. It was a disappointing revenue from its holiday quarter. Fourth quarter revenue comes in $1.36 billion. That missed the analyst projections of $1.38 billion. The parent company of Snapchat has been restructuring over the past 2 years and recently announced that they're going to cut the workforce by another 10%. Taylor Swift kicks off the Asia leg of her tour in Tokyo today. Spending on tickets, hotels, and other related activities is estimated to reach $230 million. That's according to a lecturer at Tokyo City University. Swift performs in Japan through Saturday, after which she is expected to fly to Vegas to watch her boyfriend and Chiefs tight end Travis Kelce play in the Super Bowl. That's your Bloomberg Brief, John.
Danny, thank you. It took the BOJ 20 years of zero rates and building up a massive balance sheet, and all they needed to do was organise a tour of Taylor Swift in Tokyo.
And also, also Lionel Messi, although that I guess is
to get
controversial at this
inflation
point.
up.
Exactly. They're doing a good job.
Super straightforward. Up next on this programme, the Fed in no rush.
The last 3 to 6 months has been surprisingly good news. Again, I don't want to say we're done yet. I don't want to say we're necessarily going to just glide past all the way to 2%.
That conversation's up next, live from New York City. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Live from New York City, equity futures doing okay, just about unchanged on the S&P 500. Lots of supply coming up over the next 24 hours. 10-year supply today, 30-year supply tomorrow. Yields just a little bit higher, up by 2 basis points, 4.1211 on a 10-year. Under surveillance this morning, the Fed in no rush.
The last 3 to 6 months has been surprisingly good news. Again, I don't want to say we're done yet. I don't want to say we're necessarily going to just glide past all the way to 2%. But fingers crossed, the data is looking positive.
Here's the latest this morning. Fed officials cautioning against easing too soon. Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester adding the Fed should look to gain more confidence in order to cut later this year. Jane Foley of Rabobank writing, quote, "The House view is that the Fed is unlikely to start cutting rates before June. We expect dollar strength to moderate in the second half of the year as the Fed's rate-cutting cycle kicks off." Jane Foley, I'm pleased to say, joins us now for more. So, Jane, that's the longer-term view for the second half of the year. Let's deal with the near-term right now. You've got a 3-month price target on euro-dollar of 1.05. My initial question is, why is it 1.05 and not lower, given the recent data we've seen?
Well, that's right. You know, that number's been in there for a while, and that certainly seemed more brave perhaps at the end of last year when the consensus appeared to believe that the dollar was going to soften. The dollar has, of course, strengthened this year. A little bit lumpy journey, but certainly that's been the direction. And, of course, the reasoning for that is that the market has been pushing back, perhaps reluctantly, but pushing back on or anticipating that the Fed will cut less than the market had hoped for. So we think that's got further to go. I mean, we've seen it in the comments that you've just read out from 2 of the Fed officials. From a credibility point of view, you know, why would a central banker that's worked so hard to get rid of inflation sort of give up in the last mile and risk the credibility of the central bank by allowing inflation potentially to rise again when the job's just not quite done yet?
Jane, that's very true for the Federal Reserve, but it's also true of the ECB. ECB's Isabel Schnabel trying to hold up the helm of some of the hawks, saying today in the Financial Times, recent incoming data do not allay my concerns that the last mile may be the most difficult one. Once we start to cut rates, and as I said, we are not there yet. We must proceed cautiously in small steps, may even need to pause on the way down. Jane, do you believe this? Do you actually take her on her word, or do you think that this is just jawboning?
No, you know, I think there is value in what she's saying. And I think very specifically with the ECB, they're looking at wage inflation. So the labour market in Europe is tight. This is a demographic issue. We've got it across all of the OECD. And they're watching that wage inflation. If that wage inflation begins to loosen, well, certainly that they could cut, you know, perhaps June, but perhaps not earlier than that. But I think a very interesting perspective for the ECB, given the weakness of the German economy, is what do they do then? You know, what is going to be the pace of their interest rate cutting cycle maybe into 2025? Because certainly if you look at the data that's coming out of Germany, again, very weak industrial data this morning, you know, that there is, I think, a really good argument to say that Eurodollar needs to be sort of soft over the next 24 months to allow Germany to recover. And by soft, I mean, I think there's a far greater chance of Eurodollar being, say, 104, 112 in the next 24 months and sort of 115 and above. I think the Eurozone economy needs it, and the strength of the US economy could justify that.
Does that give the ECB more cover to actually go first and go further than the United States just because of that weakness? And I'm talking about rate cuts.
Well, again, the data has to be there, so it is all very much dependent on that wage data. I think from Europe, if that is softer, yes, they can cut a little bit sooner. If it is not, I think they'll wait. But it does raise questions about how fast they might be cutting into 2025, and that could produce, quite an interesting dynamic.
Jane, it's not just European weakness that we need to talk about with regards to the euro. It's China too. China really struggling, and I think we're all struggling to get clarity on a policy extent, the policy moves, the policy effort coming out of China at the moment. Jane, where are we going in China? We see story after story, report after report, that Xi Jinping is about to do something to support the market, support the economy, and little evidence of it. Jane, what are you looking for?
Again, I think we must all realize that perhaps we're looking at China from the perspective that we look at the US economy or the European economy or the Japanese economy, where stimulating consumption is where governments tend to go. That's not necessarily the story of China, of the government that we have there. It is more about trying to boost exports and not consumption. So we must re-educate ourselves with respect to that. I think that accounts for some of the impatience that we have, because we don't perhaps understand the different psychology in China. But, this does affect so many other countries. China is the biggest consumer of commodities. It's a big export partner to Germany. And this definitely comes back to German weakness through that trade channel. If you look at factory orders, for instance, they appear to be strong yesterday in Germany. But actually, if you remove aircraft, for instance, you still see a lot of weakness in the auto sector and other parts of the machinery production sector. So the weakness of China is coming back in various different channels.
A dollar China with a 7 handle used to mean something, Jane. That's where we are right now, and seemingly people more comfortable with that. Jane, what are you expecting to develop on the currency side of things?
Well, from our point of view, I think this will more dollar strength, and I think that is going to be a story that's going to carry on, like I say, until the Fed does start to cut interest rates. And at that point, there may be a little bit more interest in maybe EM. For instance, a little bit more interest in high yield, but of course that very much depends on the broader outlook of the global economy, and China is part of that as well. But for now, I think the Chinese renminbi is on the back foot.
One thing that I try to do every morning as I read different headlines is try to parse the signal from the noise and what actually matters. And one thing that I hear increasingly in the noise are central bankers talking about the Red Sea and some of the potential inflationary pressures, particularly in Europe. Is that signal or is that noise for you?
I don't think anybody knows yet. The fact that we heard central bankers talking about this in Davos, and Lagarde mentioned it. We had Bailey talking about it in January. He mentioned it at a press conference. That's the Bank of England and the ECB, therefore, talking about this, and some others. And I think they're flagging it. But right now, we just don't know how much this is going to contribute. Now, certainly, if we look at shipping prices relative to where they were a couple of months ago, they've gone much higher. But we're still looking at nothing like the sort of situation that we had, after the pandemic. So for now, it's relatively moderate. But if this situation carries on for several months, then we could potentially be talking about another add-on to inflation. But right now, I would probably say it's more to do with reduced disinflation as added inflation, something subtle there, but right now, something to be concerned about, but nothing to panic about at the moment.
Hey, Jane, appreciate the update. Thank you. Jane Foley there of Rabobank with a 3-month target on euro-dollar of 1.05, questioning why maybe it should be even lower. You strip out the United States, the international story right now, Lisa. Not great at all. Especially because you could even use the S word. I mean, it's almost stagflationary. I thought you were thinking of a different S word then.
I was
checking
not.
the clock.
No,
This surveillance after hours.
All right. No, I'm not going after hours. It's still the morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you. But, honestly, I'm just thinking about going forward, what this potentially could be if you're dealing with wages that are increasing, for example, in Europe, but you also see industrial output really coming down.
The other S word works too, for whatever it's worth, which is why I thought that's where you were ultimately going. Coming up on the programme in the next hour, Kelly Kaminsky of Alpha Simplex, Block co-founder Jim McAlvey. Look out for that. Fantastic conversation through the hour coming up. Terry Wiseman of Macquarie, Herman Chan of Bloomberg Intelligence with NYCB down in the pre-market. Once again, from New York City, equity futures just a touch negative here. We're down by 0.04% on the S&P 500. Last week, Meta had a massive move higher on earnings. This morning, Snap It's getting absolutely battered in the pre-market, looking like a completely different company to the one ran by Mark Zuckerberg. From New York City this morning, good morning. The second hour of Bloomberg Surveillance up next.
The Fed just can't give you what the markets want the Fed to give you.
If inflation does continue to behave as it's been, the committee is a little just struggling to catch up to how quickly the data have moved and what to make of that.
This idea that you can have stable or improving economic growth, but inflation continuing to decelerate, we just thought that was never credible.
Interest rates, while they're a dampener, aren't really able to offset that big moderation of inflation that we're seeing.
The inflation genie is not fitting back in the bottle.
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Jonathan Ferro, Lisa Abramowitz, and Anne-Marie Hordern.
The second hour of Bloomberg Surveillance starts right now, live from New York City for our audience worldwide. Good morning, good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance alongside Lisa Abramowitz, together with Anne-Marie Hordern. I'm Jonathan Ferro. Your equity market on the S&P 500 totally unchanged. Let's work through some single names and start with Uber. Plenty of earnings out there this morning. Uber is doing okay. Lisa, better than expected.
People looking at fourth quarter earnings coming in, or bookings, I should say, coming in higher than expected. But I just want to note, this is their first annual profit for Uber since its IPO. And I wonder if this is a ride-hailing story or if this is a consolidation of the behemoth story, because Uber certainly is seeing growth that maybe some of the competitors are not.
That stock is unchanged. That looks boring. Let me show you a name that is anything but. Snap is down in the pre-market by more than 30%. We're talking about a third of the market cap gone in the pre-market. Unreal. Look at the numbers. We're talking about losses. We're talking about misses. Lisa, nothing pretty about this everywhere you look.
Talking about ad revenue, which was the boon for the likes of Meta, which is interesting that you sort of juxtaposed Meta and the record gain that it had in market cap last week. They're talking about a challenging operating environment, particularly with ad revenues, talking about revenue increasing by 5%, missing the analyst projection. Also announcing another 10% reduction in staff to, quote, reduce hierarchy and promote in-person collaboration. Again, how much is this a Snap story and how much is this a macro story? How much is this a consolidation of all the business at Meta and maybe not at Snap?
Well, for some companies, the so-called tech session is not over. The recession of 2022 that we saw play out quite brutally for even some of the big cap names as well. For some names like Snap, it's not over. It's
not over, and they're still reducing staff. They're still trying to right size. The focus on getting back to the office I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Tech was talking about everyone can work remote, and suddenly not so much.
Well, that has implications for what we're about to talk about now, which is NYCB. So I'm sure you're all following this bank at home. In the pre-market, it's doing all right. It's negative about 3%. It hasn't been doing all right over the last week or so. We're talking about double-digit losses in the last 4 or 5 days or something like that, Lisa, which is just absolutely unbelievable. We've lost more than half the market cap since the end of January. And the get back to work, get back to the office theme, this is what's hurting them. Commercial real estate in a big way.
And it hasn't been fully repriced. And we're talking about zombies. I want to go back to Tony Dwyer's zombie idea, because really it's this question of when does it actually come to the fore, because everyone's been talking that this is going to be a problem. And yet now suddenly we're seeing it come out of the woodwork. That is what I think is spooking people. The idea that we knew that this was an issue, and now suddenly it's become something more imminent.
For Secretary Janet Yellen as well. So yesterday on Capitol Hill in front of the House Financial Services Committee, I believe tomorrow, Anne-Marie, in front of the Senate Banking Committee, becoming a bigger and bigger issue down in Washington.
I imagine she's going to get asked specifically about this again tomorrow, because she didn't want to comment on a single name, but she did say there is concerns in this sector, and she pointed to the supervisor. She said they need careful attention when it comes to supervisory. But we are aware that this could create financial stability risk or losses in the banking system.
What else can she say?
Exactly what you took the words out of my mouth. I mean, honestly, she can't be like, this isn't a problem. And she can't say this is Armageddon. It's sort of, we're carefully watching it. Trust us.
It's the lesson of last year. And we mentioned this in the last week or so. The lesson of last year wasn't a lack of regulation. It was poorly executed supervision. And I think what's interesting about our reporting so far this week is basically the regulator was leaning on the specific bank, according to our reporting, to do something about things and do something about it fast, which is not what we saw last year.
The fallout, though, is similar, which is interesting because even though regulators were on them to do something, it hasn't stemmed some of the losses, but maybe it has given people confidence that they have some supervision. We heard that from Jay Powell over the weekend, too. They're working with a number of banks. So everyone's saying, okay, who else? What does it rhyme like?
What other names? Yeah. NYCB is one of them, down by about 2.86% in the pre-market, much better than where it was a little bit earlier this morning. The broader market, in the equity market at the moment on the S&P 500, futures look like this. We're negative, but only down by 0.07%. In the bond market, yields are higher by 3 basis points, 412.88. Elisa wants this on repeat. 10-year notes come today, $42 billion worth. Elisa, tomorrow, $25 billion of 30-year bonds.
And I caveat this with, it's not going to matter unless it does, right? I mean, it's sort of talking about Yogi Berra quotes, but this is a sort of thing where if it gets messy, then people will start to talk about debt sustainability. And if it goes well, people will say debt sustainability is not in anyone's mind.
It mattered in October, not so much now, apparently. But that can change quickly.
Exactly.
That can change quickly, and it changed quickly based on just Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen saying, yeah, less longer-dated debt than you thought, than you expected.
And so what could shift the sentiment? There's really a question of how quickly can this change in a dime, and then how self-fulfilling could it be, given that sentiment begets sentiment and that people tend to get worked up because nobody really can follow the narrative at a time of deep uncertainty.
You don't sound frustrated at all. The 2 years up by a single basis point. The 2 year right now, 4.42. Coming up this hour, Katie Kaminsky of Alpha Simplex as the Fed urges patience on rate cuts. Jim McKelvey, co-founder of Block on banking regulation. Terry Wiseman of Macquarie on US exceptionalism. All of that and more still to come. We begin with our top story this hour. Fed officials continuing to push back against early rate cuts. Cleveland Fed President Loretta Mester saying this, quote, "It would be a mistake to move rates down too soon or too quickly without sufficient evidence that inflation was on a sustainable and timely path back to 2%. So is long fixed income still the new short?" Joining us now for more is Katie Kaminsky of Alpha Simplex. So Katie, that's your line. Long is the new short. Is that still the case?
Yes, it is. And I think the biggest issue for me is that we have not been in position similar to a soft landing for 2 years. And now suddenly technical signals are agreeing with a soft landing narrative. Is this hope, or is this potentially something to worry about? That's what I'm thinking about right now.
How does that jive with what we've seen in the data Friday and again on Monday?
Well, I mean, if you look at fixed income, it's kind of in a holding pattern. There's definitely buying pressure, which is being pushed off for this huge hopes for cuts. So people are thinking we need to get in now before we get the cuts. But as you see from the policy speak, there is no hurry for cuts anytime soon. And so as a result, fixed income is sort of floundering back and forth between it's time to be long, but at the same time, it's going to take more time for cuts than people would like.
Katie, how much do you care about auctions?
We care a little bit, but it's exactly like you said. I mean, it's really a no op unless something really happens. And it is something that is a risk for the long end of the curve. If we are going to see continued higher for longer rates for a longer period of time, should we see that weakness in the long end of the curve, we might see the steepener without the cuts. So I think that's why people are watching it, just to see if that could show signs of some fragility in the system.
I was talking earlier about how I feel like it's deja vu all over again. We kind of feel like Back to the Future with this idea of, the no landing or soft landing and what we're going to do with a reaccelerating U.S. economy. If the Fed remains on hold for longer and isn't so quick to cut, does that give you more conviction or less conviction with the long bond call?
Well, I think bonds have gone through their cycle. We've seen an inversion. We've seen a flattening. And frankly, the next step is a steeper yield curve. And so if we do stay higher for longer, then, it could be weakness in the long end of the curve where people kind of lose some faith, which you have to watch for. I think for us, the biggest thing that is a concern is if you have upside risk in inflation that people are really hoping against. That's something that I think we worry about for this year.
So, Katie, let's drill deeper. Let's go through some scenario analysis. We've been trying to figure out around the table whether good news is good news for stocks. So we've been looking at the reaction in the bond market, strong data, high yields. Then we'll go to the equity market. Friday, we were okay. Monday, not so much. So, Katie, I'm trying to work out how that bond stock correlation has been developing over the last few weeks off the back of these upside surprises.
So I think the biggest thing for us, going into what you're saying, is that everything isn't the same as it used to be. We're still seeing positive stock bond correlation, which is consistent with inflation still being a key theme. And we're also seeing heightened bond volatility, which is also suggesting that people are very uncertain about the direction of fixed income going forward. This is not consistent with a soft landing, we're there narrative. So I think that's something to watch, because it's something that indicates that asset prices are still really focused on inflation.
Is this consistent with a stronger US currency?
Well, I think the challenge here, and I think I want to point this out, this is something we're talking about right now, is the biggest challenge is going to be the role of China in this entire narrative. If you look at China and the BCOM, they have moved hand in hand. So the question you might ask yourself is, should China come back online? How many of these stories are going to kind of turn the other direction? China is a major player in terms of raw commodities, which often lead the pack when we come to inflation kind of roaring back. So I think that's what I'm interested in this year, is what happens in China and what is its role in commodity prices that could be sort of a huge factor that we're not thinking about.
Which brings us full circle back to the idea that asset prices, and you are very focused on inflation, the potential risk of a reacceleration. Do stocks hold in that case? That seems to be what a lot of people are saying, is that stocks are a better bet right now than bonds or cash, should we get that inflation surprise.
And we'll think about it. I mean, I agree, because when you have an inflation surprise, it goes straight to bonds. Those are long-term cash flows. Inflation, especially in the short run, isn't so bad for equity markets. I think the challenge is when you hit more restrictive financial conditions, which frankly, the data is not suggesting yet. And so as a result, equities are still looking relatively good, and the US is really looking ahead of other regions. So I think that I would agree with that.
US exceptionalism is a theme all over again. Katie, thank you. Katie Kaminsky of Alpha Simplex. We'll catch up with Terry Wiseman of Macquarie about that later this hour. Your equity market on the S&P 500 is totally unchanged. Let's give you an update on stories elsewhere this morning. Here's your Bloomberg Brief with Danny Berger. Hey, Danny.
Hey, John. Online talk show host Tucker Carlson has interviewed Russian President Vladimir Putin. The former Fox News anchor was spotted in Moscow in recent days. The interview is Putin's first conversation with Western media since the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Carlson says he also intends to interview Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Shares of Snap plunging in the pre-market trade this morning following disappointing revenue from holiday quarters. Fourth quarter revenue came in at $1.36 billion. That missed analyst projections of $1.38 billion. The parent company of Snapchat has been restructuring over the past 2 years and announced that they'll cut workforces by another 10%. Nearly 68 million Americans are expected to place a bet on this year's Super Bowl. That's according to the Gambling Industry's National Trade Association. And that's a 35% jump from last year. The total value of bets is estimated to surpass $23 billion. But of that, just $1.5 billion is projected to be with legal outlets. Sunday's Super Bowl pits the Kansas City Chiefs against the San Francisco 49ers. And that's your Bloomberg Brief. John.
That stat's amazing. Not the 68 one, the other one. Danny, thanks for that. That's phenomenal, just to hear those numbers.
Yeah, but how much of that is like squares and things like that? People kind of betting across the table versus real kind of formal illegal bets.
Are we going to do our own bet here?
You want to bet now?
To be honest, I don't know anything about these teams, so no.
Okay, so the answer to that is no. We can do that in a commercial break if you want, like for $1 or something like that. Up next on this program, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Capitol Hill.
I do have a concern about commercial real estate. I believe it's manageable, although there may be some institutions that are quite stressed by this problem.
That conversation up next. This is Bloomberg. Live from New York City this morning. Good morning to you all. The equity market on the S&P 500 slightly lower by 0.04%. Yields are higher by 2 or 3 basis points on a 10-year 412.88. Under surveillance this morning, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Capitol Hill.
I do have a concern about commercial real estate. I believe it's manageable, although there may be some institutions that are quite stressed by this problem.
Here's the latest this morning. Yellen voicing concern over losses in commercial real estate, stopping short of commenting on a single institution. This as Moody's cuts New York Community Bank Corp to junk, and shares hit their lowest level since 1997. Herman Chan, senior U.S. regional bank analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence, joins us now for more. Herman, is this the worst of it, or is there still more to come?
Look, there's probably still more to come in terms of what's going to happen next with New York Community Bank, and then for the broader regional peers that do have exposure to areas of concern like commercial real estate. So the story's not over yet, and we're bracing for some more bumps in the road.
Herman, do you have a sense of how many banks the Federal Reserve is talking with right now and trying to oversee, as well as the Treasury, as we heard from Janet Yellen yesterday?
Yeah, I think the banks that really have higher exposure to commercial real estate, there's a regulatory ratio that's been discussed about 300% of commercial real estate as a percentage of your total capital. And there's also another regulatory marker, 100% of construction lending as a percentage of total capital. So banks that clear that metric may have higher regulatory scrutiny in this current environment.
The good news is that NYCB is down 5%. Herman Chan at Bloomberg Intelligence. Now, I say that's good news because yesterday we were down by 22%, at least. So the day before we were down by almost 11%.
So basically, this is what, a revival, because it's only down 5%. This is stabilization at $4 a share.
Down double digits Thursday, down double digits Wednesday. We've lost more than half the market cap of this bank in just about a week.
Which raises this question of, okay, first of all, can it continue? Does this really jeopardize some of the relationships? When you have to come out and say this doesn't jeopardize a relationship, it's not a good thing to hear. But then also, how far does this go when you see the KBW index of regional bank stocks down 11%? Since January 29th.
I think we've all been excited for this conversation all morning. Joining us around the table is Jim McCalvey, the co-founder of Block and former chairman of the board of the St. Louis Fed, joining us around the table for the rest of this hour. Good morning, sir.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Jim.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
We're going to have a lot of fun right now. Maybe not on this topic, though.
Let's start with the gloom.
Let's talk about the stress in the regional banking sector. Your thoughts on last year, which seemed to be rate stress. This year, is it going to be the year of credit stress?
Well, I mean, everyone was worried about the banks because there's such a concentration in commercial lending. And commercial real estate isn't worth what it used to be because people aren't going into the office. But the good news is, and at the last Fed meeting that I was in Washington, D.C., we discussed this. The good news is it's a problem, but it's not a surprise. So everybody saw this coming. So it's baked into the rates. And you're seeing it play out in the numbers right now. We're discussing that. But this isn't going to come as some pandemic-like surprise where all of a sudden it knocks the world economy over because we didn't see it coming.
It begs the question why some of these banks haven't already provisioned for it.
Well,
NYCB came out in the last week and did just that.
Well, it was a crash. I mean, the pandemic hit, people stopped going to the office, you had these long-term commitments, these mortgages, and that doesn't unwind instantly. So you can't get out of it. It's a game of musical chairs. I mean, you're stuck with it. You know you're stuck with it. Everybody knows you're stuck with it. So you can't just dump it on some other sucker.
Well, so as someone who
SoftBank is
yes, right. Well, I mean, we could discuss.
We can talk about that.
Yeah, we can have a lot of fun with
actually,
that.
No, we could actually.
We miss you. We miss those days.
We could talk about Adam Newman going back to WeWork, but I am curious.
I guess you know.
But I'm just curious. When you take a step back, whether some of the disruption in some of the models makes it more difficult to sufficiently understand the risk. We're talking about, for example, SVB. I'm thinking about some of these other banks in terms of concentration, in terms of just their concentrations of particular asset classes?
Yeah, so the models have been, sort of slow to respond. But I mean, if you look at it, the system really performed quite well during the SVB situation because the SVB was sort of a weird bank. It had this very weird concentration of behaviors and deposits and this sort of niche-y thing in Silicon Valley. And when it blew up, the system reacted so quickly and so well. And there was a question, were we going to, bail out uninsured depositors? And the answer, internally, which we all knew, of course we were, because it's the regulated financial systems. You can contrast that with an unregulated system, like what happened with FTX. There was, again, a problem, but there was no regulation. There was nobody in there to, sort of, no adult in the room. I mean, I think literally. And it collapsed, and people got wiped out. So, what I look at is, sort of systemic risk. And the FTX disaster was a disaster, but it sort of proved that the model worked. Now, could we regulate better? Yes. Should we? Absolutely. And we're changing the models. But I was on the Fed at the time, and if you watched how the Fed, the FDIC, and the Treasury all responded in, in real time to a problem, it was very comforting.
Well, so you've been on all sides of this, which I love.
Yes.
Because you've helped, you founded Block, and you also have seen it from the regulatory standpoint. You talked about SoftBank. We're talking about zombies. How many bad actors are there left who haven't been exposed in some of sort of the new finance?
Lots. There are always lots of the bad actors. Look, it's not some sort of thing like we extinguish it. These people move from thing to thing, and a lot of them get to find the next thing. I don't know what it is. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of fraud in AI. I assume there's going to be a lot of fraud. There was tremendous amount of fraud in advertising. So we just saw what happened with Snap and Bloomberg. And advertising for years was this just total cesspool of unregulated fraud. And it's still going on right now. That's why companies like Bloomberg are so amazing, because you guys actually are a solid fact-creating, fact-reporting company. Whereas most of them, you look at what's happening with Dow Jones, look at what's happening, sort of the news world, it's just imploding.
Because of AI. And you think there needs to be actual regulation for that?
No, it's not. It's not AI that's killing news. It's the fact that, basically the platforms have hoovered up all the ad money. Yeah. Bloomberg being the exception.
How are we going to confront an era of disinformation, the potential of that coming from AI in the years to come? What's the best way of doing that?
Nobody knows right now. I mean, I think in the world of AI, we absolutely need to start thinking about regulation quickly, and not just, sort of government regulation. I think what we need is a market of regulation. So in other words, we want to have for-profit companies that are monitoring artificial intelligence developments. Much in the way we have Underwriters Laboratories, certifies, probably this keyboard has a UL listing on it.
So since you've been on all sides, I love that you've been on the government side, and you've also been on the innovation side. There's been this sort of angst that governments can't pay enough to get the talent to actually counter some of the AI threats and get ahead of them in any real way. Do you pay credence to that kind of idea?
We can pay enough. It turns out you don't actually have to pay top dollar, because when I was at the Fed, the Fed has a cap. We're basically not allowed to pay much more than the president earns to hire people. So we were hiring people and paying them a quarter or a tenth of what their market rate would be. But there's some people who will work that way. There are a lot of actually excellent people who come in and do that. So it's not just a question of throwing dollars at a problem to solve it.
We see that at the Federal Reserve. I think you can earn more as a regional bank president, say on San Francisco, for instance, than you can as a governor of the board at the Federal Reserve, which is kind of nuts.
Yeah, I mean, when Chris Waller moved to D.C., it was...
Took a pay cut, didn't he?
Oh, no, well, not much of a pay cut, because he was already working for the Fed in St. Louis. But I mean, the poor guy couldn't afford housing. This year in D.C., this is a real problem. So I think we should allow the government entities to pay more. I think that would be a good thing, that we shouldn't have this artificial salary cap, because it is hurting. I want to set the next segment with you as well, Jim, because you're going to be sticking around with us. I've always wanted to ask you this. Why the banks here in America didn't create Block? How they missed this? How did that happen? So, I mean, I read an entire book on this. It's called The Innovation Stack, which I shouldn't promote it because it was published 3 years ago. I published it during the pandemic, so nobody wanted to read about it. But look, if you think about the world of innovation, the truly transformative innovation always happens outside of the market. Because what the market does, the market fills its space and it says, okay, we are going to serve people down to this level. And when Block started, which we used to call Square, when Square started, the ability for small merchants to transact using the same tools that the big guys had wasn't there. And so we built an entire system underneath what the market at the time was. And as a result, millions of little businesses were able to then, have the tools so they could take payments and they could do their payroll. They had, we gave them all these tools. But that, by definition, never happens from within the industry. So, my research for the book basically showed this pattern again and again. So the same thing happened, great example would be airlines, okay? So at the time before Southwest Airlines, airlines were basically the tool of the rich. You could travel in an airplane if you were rich or if somebody else was paying for it. But normal people took the bus. And Southwest Airlines basically invented what we now think of as air travel because they made it cheap. They made it, affordable to everybody. And that innovation never comes from within the industry. So the banking industry, as it existed in 2009 when we started Square, was never going to do what we did.
We're going to keep talking about it. I also want to know if you take any blame for what happens now when you go to get a coffee and they flip the screen around and
tips. Yes.
up to
Oh,
25%.
yeah.
I'm wondering if you actually take responsibility for that, Jim. Jim McAlfee's going to stick with us from New York. This is Bloomberg.
ERC 404 is an experimental Ethereum token standard that aims to combine the characteristics of ERC 20 and ERC 721 tokens. It is designed to enable fractional ownership of non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and merge the concepts of fungible and non-fungible tokens. The developers behind ERC 404 are working on submitting an Ethereum Improvement Proposal, EIP, to formalize the standard. But it is important to note that ERC 404 has not undergone an official audit and is currently an unofficial and experimental standard. Despite this, some crypto exchanges have declared their support for ERC 404 tokens. The first token launched under the ERC 404 standard, called Pandora, has seen significant growth since its launch. It is essential to recognize that ERC 404 is still in the experimental phase and has not been officially recognized as an Ethereum token standard.
Explore X World Games, the epitome of innovative asset ownership and immersive gameplay. You got here just in time. Other side is a gamified, interoperable metaverse currently under development. The game blends mechanics from massively multiplayer online role-playing games, MMORPGs, and Web3-enabled virtual worlds. Think of it as a meta-RPG where the players own the world, your NFTs can become playable characters, and thousands can play together in real time. Stepn is a Web3 lifestyle app with inbuilt GameFi and SocialFi elements. Cypher Odyssey is a multiplayer looter-shooter ARPG with roguelite elements. Pixel Island is a pixel-style full-on-chain Web3 game. #OpBNB Chain. Bitcoin Cats is a versatile gaming platform that offers more than just pixel games. It features AAA level 3D MMORPGs, bringing a new dimension to gaming. The platform encompasses a range of Web3 functionalities including mining, NFT trading, and DAOs, as well as traditional Web2 elements like PvP, PvE, and guild formation. The gameplay is dynamic, with continuous updates to keep the experience fresh and engaging. At the heart of this platform is Bitcoin Cats, the core IP that drives the game's universe. We've also forged partnerships with numerous prominent Web3 IPs, such as Bored Ape, Pudgy Penguin, and Bitcoin Frogs, integrating many of their holders into our gaming world. These collaborations bring a rich diversity of characters and elements, making Bitcoin Cats a unique and expansive gaming experience. Big Time is a free-to-play, multiplayer action RPG game that combines fast action combat and adventure through time and space. Explore ancient mysteries and futuristic civilizations as you battle your way through history. Pick up rare digital collectibles and tokens as you fight and defeat enemies. Collect in-game items and tokens, produce digital collectibles, or hang out with friends. Limitless environments and adventure instances give you infinite replayability. The gameplay options are endless. Got carrots? An interactive entertainment experience from AMGI Studios. Free to play, early access game out now. Rabbit Face. You got here just in time. Other side is a gamified, interoperable metaverse currently under development. The game blends mechanics from massively multiplayer online role-playing games, MMORPGs, and Web3-enabled virtual worlds. Think of it as a meta-RPG where the players own the world, your NFTs can become playable characters, and thousands can play together in real time. Stepn is a Web3 lifestyle app with inbuilt GameFi and SocialFi elements. Cypher Odyssey is a multiplayer looter-shooter ARPG with roguelite elements. Pixel Island is a pixel-style full-on-chain Web3 game. #OpBNB Chain. Bitcoin Cats is a versatile gaming platform that offers more than just pixel games. It features AAA level 3D MMORPGs, bringing a new dimension to gaming. The platform encompasses a range of Web3 functionalities including mining, NFT trading, and DAOs, as well as traditional Web2 elements like PvP, PvE, and guild formation. The gameplay is dynamic, with continuous updates to keep the experience fresh and engaging. At the heart of this platform is Bitcoin Cats, the core IP that drives the game's universe. We've also forged partnerships with numerous prominent Web3 IPs, such as Bored Ape, Pudgy Penguin, and Bitcoin Frogs, integrating many of their holders into our gaming world. These collaborations bring a rich diversity of characters and elements, making Bitcoin Cats a unique and expansive gaming experience. Big Time is a free-to-play, multiplayer action RPG game that combines fast action combat and adventure through time and space. Explore ancient mysteries and futuristic civilizations as you battle your way through history. Pick up rare digital collectibles and tokens as you fight and defeat enemies. Collect in-game items and tokens, produce digital collectibles, or hang out with friends. Limitless environments and adventure instances give you infinite replayability. The gameplay options are endless. Got carrots? An interactive entertainment experience from AMGI Studios. Free to play, early access game out now. Rabbit face. You got here just in time. Other side is a gamified, interoperable metaverse currently under development. Moonlight is a collection of 3D avatar NFTs developed by Altiverse and was born with a unique personality and talent. Moonlight can do various tasks in Terminus. She will be your best Meta GF and Meta BFF in the Altiverse MetaFi ecosystem. You can design your Meta GF and Meta BFF from the feet up precisely how you want them to be. With a new hairstyle, facial appearance, figure, and outfit, you can change almost every key element of your Meta GF and Meta BFF with personal touches. In addition, you may help your Meta GF and Meta BFF to acquire more talents, increase their favorability towards you, and enhance your relationships. 1. Help your Meta G and Meta BFF to acquire more talents. 2. Increase Meta GF and Meetap's favorability towards you, and enhance your relationships. 3. Bridging Web 2 and Web 3 with your Meta GF and Meta BFF. For more information about the project, click here. As the humanoid girl awakened in the laboratory, she was immediately struck by the unfamiliar surroundings. Her head ached, and her memories were fuzzy, leaving her feeling disoriented and confused. She looked around at the strange machines and unfamiliar faces, feeling lost and alone. But then, a man with a kind face and gentle voice approached her, offering a warm greeting. "Welcome to this world, my dear," he said. "You are very special, just like all your sisters here in this lab." The girl looked around and saw other humanoid girls who seemed just as lost and confused as she felt. She couldn't help but wonder about their stories and their pasts. The man, Oswald, explained that the girl and all her sisters were unique because they had been programmed with human emotions and feelings. He told her they were part of a social experiment that would be released into the world on Christmas Day by the company Altiverse. "All of you will be given to the world on this year's 25th of December, Oswald said with a smile. As the girl listened to Oswald's explanation, she felt confused and curious. Who was this man, and what was the purpose of this experiment? And why did she have no memories of her past? Yet, despite the many questions swirling in her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper and more mysterious was at play here. As the pieces of her past slowly fell into place, the girl understood that she was a crucial part of a social experiment tasked with practicing human behaviors and cultivating her talents to help citizens live better in Terminus City. She was determined to fulfill a daunting responsibility with empathy and dedication. Nosina, NOS, is a cryptocurrency that aims to democratize GPU cloud computing, providing companies with more accessible and affordable compute power for running AI. It is designed to be the first decentralized computation platform powered by the Solana network. Nosina offers GPUs with the convenience of the cloud at a fraction of the costs, making it a cost-effective GPU grid with zero lock-in, developed and customized for AI inference workloads. The project believes that communities can provide the computation needed in a decentralized way, and a strong community can keep a project powered for eternity. The current price of Nosina is approximately $1.70, with a 24-hour trading volume of $2,068,499 and a market cap of $77,169,280. The total supply of NOS tokens is 100 million, with a circulating supply of 82,618,925 NOS. NOS tokens can be traded on centralized and decentralized crypto exchanges, with popular options including MEXC, Radium, and Gate.io. Related: what is the technology behind Nosinacoin? How can you buy Nosinacoin? What is the market cap?
Hey gamers! Welcome back to Audio Cryptopedia. Today, we've got something special in store for you, a review of the highly anticipated game, Chain Arena. I'm your host Crypto4Bitcoin, and let's jump right into it. Now, before we get started, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more gaming content. Alright, let's talk about Chain Arena. This game has been creating quite the buzz, and after spending some quality time with it, I've got some thoughts to share. First things first, let's talk about the visuals. Chain Arena hits the sweet spot with its stunning graphics and sleek design. The in-game environments are absolutely gorgeous and character details are on point. It's clear that the developers put a lot of effort into making this game visually appealing. Now, onto the gameplay mechanics. Chain Arena introduces a unique blend of strategy and action that kept me hooked from the start. The chain-based combat system adds a refreshing twist, allowing for dynamic and strategic battles. Trust me, you've never experienced combat like this before. Character progression is another strong suit of Chain Arena. The skill tree is extensive, providing players with a myriad of ways to customize their characters. Whether you prefer a brute force approach or a more strategic playstyle, this game has you covered. But what really sets Chain Arena apart is its multiplayer experience. The PvP battles are intense and competitive, and teaming up with friends for guild missions adds a whole new layer of fun. The social aspect of this game is a game changer. Now, let's talk about the in-game economy. Chain Arena strikes a good balance here. While there are in-app purchases available, the game doesn't force them upon you. Earning rewards through gameplay feels rewarding, and it's clear that the developers value player satisfaction. In conclusion, Chain Arena gets a big thumbs up from me. It's a visually stunning, strategically engaging game with a fantastic multiplayer experience. If you're into action-packed RPGs with a unique twist, this one's a must-try. What are your thoughts on Chain Arena? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more gaming content. Until next time, happy gaming!
Teleport is a decentralized ride-sharing app that operates on the Solana blockchain. It aims to create a community-driven, decentralized ride-sharing platform to compete with established companies like Uber and Lyft. The app allows users to request a ride by entering their destination, and a licensed and insured driver from local ride-share companies will pick them up. Teleport is built on the TRIP protocol, which is powered by the Decentralized Engineering Corporation's DEC technology. The project seeks to address some of the challenges faced by traditional ride-sharing services by giving more control to drivers and customers. The app is designed to reward both riders and drivers by turning ride-sharing into a protocol, thereby creating an open economy with aligned economic incentives. The Teleport app is available for iPhone users, and it is positioned as a gateway to an open rideshare network, aiming to free ride-sharing from monopolies. The platform has received $9 million in seed funding and has garnered support from notable investors and industry professionals. The app is expected to be live at the end of the fourth quarter of this year. Additionally, Teleport has a strong social media presence, including a Twitter account where they share information about their unique approach to ride-sharing, emphasizing lower costs for riders and higher earnings for drivers. The Internet is an open network on which anyone can start an Internet service provider, run a website, or build an email client. This open structure has led to the creation of the world's most dynamic economy, the online economy. However, before the invention of digital programmable money, it was impossible to design open systems for marketplaces such as rideshare, food delivery, and vacation rentals. As a result, intermediaries have stepped in and started charging high fees instead of letting markets set fair prices. In the rideshare industry, the intermediaries' take rate can often exceed 40%. This means that a significant portion of the money paid by customers is taken out of local economies and funneled towards centralized, multinational intermediaries. This paper proposes an alternative approach, the creation of a fair and independent marketplace that is built on an open and interoperable protocol, the Rideshare Protocol, TRIP. TRIP enables local, lean rideshare companies to work together and form a global network that benefits drivers, riders, and regional economies while being self-governed by the participants. The purpose of a rideshare system is to connect drivers with nearby riders and facilitate safe, fast, comfortable, and economical transportation. The key actors in rideshare are drivers and riders. The rider is able to indicate their current location and intended destination via a rideshare application installed on their phone. A rideshare company then looks for nearby drivers who are similarly connected to the platform. In a closed system, rideshare applications from different companies are not compatible. If email worked in this way, users of Microsoft Outlook and Apple Mail would not be able to email each other. Similarly, if the web were closed, Apple's Safari browser would not be able to communicate with Microsoft's website. When protocols are closed, like in the case of rideshare, it becomes difficult for users to switch between different vendors. Decentralizing rideshare means returning it to the open norms of the Internet. In a decentralized system, participants can choose from a variety of apps and servers by many different vendors that communicate with each other. Centralized rideshare services often do not allow the market to set a fair price. Instead, they set prices themselves and maximize the value they can extract. Redesigning rideshare as a decentralized system means more money goes to drivers, riders pay less per ride, and more money stays in local economies. Many internet applications, including Twitter and Reddit, were initially developed as open systems. Twitter launched its public API in September 2006, leading to a thriving ecosystem of third-party Twitter software that helped the platform succeed. However, Twitter decided to lock down its API in August 2012, once it became large enough to no longer require third-party applications. Reddit's openness has followed a similar path. Thousands of developers have created third-party Reddit software over the years, but Reddit is now shutting down API access in preparation for its IPO. Centralized rideshare companies similarly have promised good pay and flexibility to drivers but then reneged on those promises the moment they were no longer convenient for users and developers alike. Welcome to Chain Arena, a Web3 idle game. Chain Guardians present Chain Arena, an idle RPG scroller based on the classic idle game Skull Arena. Download the game here and join us in glorious battle. Rank up your Skull character into a digital collectible. Play the Chain Arena to earn skulls and rank up your Skull character into a digital collectible. The higher your rank, the more valuable your collectible. Once you reach at least a rank, you'll be able to claim your NFT. What is Chain Arena? Chain Arena is an action-packed idle RPG crossover featuring characters from Skull Arena and Chain Guardians. Joining forces. During an unexplained intergalactic event, heroes from the Chain Guardian universe are sent back in time to the war-torn land of Basel. In this strange new world, the Guardians are thrust into a war between the righteous tribes of Basel and the Dragon tribe, who will stop at nothing to conquer the world. It's up to Bitsy Naka and Knight Commander Rachel to defeat the evil dragons and save the world. Own a CG digital character asset? You can use them to join the battle in Basel. Chain Arena digital asset provides an aura boost that grants access to a playable Chain Guardians warrior with a 30% stats boost unlocked. Evolve your free-to-play heroes into digital collectibles. The initial 6 free-to-play Skull heroes can be upgraded to warrior-class playable characters. Each character has a unique set of skills and abilities, and can be upgraded to Orified status. Orified characters have a 30% boost to their stats and a unique Orified badge. Chain Arena New Epoch. As each epoch dawns, player progress and stats reset to 0, leveling the battlefield for all challengers. Leaderboards are wiped clean, kindling a fierce competition for supremacy and recognition. Reclaim your riches. Fear not, your valued purchases will be restored at the beginning of each epoch. Whether you purchased 1,000 diamonds from the store or have a Bitsy hero by your side, you'll start the new epoch fully equipped and ready for battle. Immortal Legacies. During or at the close of an epoch, selected characters and weapons may achieve immortality by transforming into NFTs. These cherished NFTs will follow you into the next epoch, symbolizing the enduring legacy of your victories. Skull characters can be converted to NFTs via the bonding curve, while weapons may attain NFT status based on player performance and effort. Forge your destiny. The celestial epochs of Chain Arena beckon you to seize the moment and display your might in the ever-shifting cryptoverse. Each new epoch presents a chance to prove your mettle, outpace your adversaries, and inscribe your name in the annals of Chain Arena. A legendary odyssey awaits. Will you heed the call and secure your place among the heroes of Chain Arena? Availability of epochs. The first epoch will be launched during our in-game soft release, targeted for mid-May, with in-app purchases available. Why epochs? Epochs ensure all new players can experience Chain Arena in a fair environment, as rankings and levels are reset. They also provide immersive game experiences for current players, who can battle in a fresh epoch with reset character progress and levels. Chain Arena Origins. Chain Arena, a mysterious portal opened in cypherspace and sucked Bitsy and her crew into a dark and dangerous dimension. Now they must fight to survive and find their way back home. Bonding curve for free-to-play and FOMO heroes. This is a race to the top. First come, first served for hero to warrior evolution. Make sure you don't miss out. For F2P Skull Hero, the first 50 free-to-play Skull characters to progress, you will need to claim their free-to-play warrior card upgrade. Once claimed, the subsequent 50 users will need to get to a